Speak and pause. Do you hear a replay?
Trying to do a full season pilot of the Livingston shelter model, which is emergency shelter and seasonal, being only in the coldest months of the year, really trying to, as a 100% community funded model, really trying to be open during the times where there's the most need. Currently, in the housing insecurity in Park County, I can go over the current need right now, and then what crisis looks like, and the vulnerable, at risk, and how we kind of move people up through that spectrum. Just HRDC, we're a community action agency. We serve, we operate and serve whatever gaps there are in the community, which include food, nutrition, housing, transportation, early childhood. I think you all are aware, the commissioners all are aware of HRDC's work. So just to be very specific on what we mean when we say shelter, and along the spectrum of housing need, is if you move from crisis, we try to get people to move from a place of crisis to thriving as quickly as possible. So people entering on the spectrum of crisis being those that are experiencing homelessness, and they need emergency shelter. And then we also have services that kind of move them up through that spectrum, but we'll focus on our services for shelter. Right now, HRDC, we're working between Park, Gallatin, and Moore County. We're working with over 150 households experiencing homelessness, 11 of those households being in Park County. And that means that those folks are not the couch surfers, they're not the people doubling up. Those are folks that are actually sleeping outside in their car or in a place not meant for human habitation. So we were gathered by a group of CRC, the local CRC in Livingston, and we knew that we were working with folks sleeping in their car outside or in a shed. Our community partners knew of a handful of folks. So we knew that there was a need and that people could use it that night, and they asked us to open a shelter model. So we piloted last year we attempted the full season. I'll tell you why we couldn't do a full season, primarily because the global pandemic happened and we weren't prepared for that. So we did end up closing 2 weeks early, but we also did open for 7 days earlier because this time last year there was snow on the ground. So the primary purpose of the Warming Center is just to offer a warm, safe place for those in a housing crisis. Shelter season is just November through March, really trying to make sure that we're prioritizing funds in the most dangerous time of the year when folks can actually die outside due to the extreme weather. We're trying to offer a warm, safe place to sleep. We're only open 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. And the Livingston Warming Center has the capacity to sleep 8 individuals. Unfortunately, our weather, we had a pretty mild winter last winter, but the season before was pretty harsh. And but unfortunately, our weather doesn't abide by our November through March season, and neither does our folks in a housing crisis. So we still have folks without a home tonight. Historically, the coldest time of the day is actually 7 a.m. and that's when we're asking people to leave. But that's just the capacity in which we have to offer a warm, safe place to sleep. And the capacity at the Warming Center really only have, if we have 11 people sleeping outside and only have the capacity to sleep 8, we already know that we need to expand that operation at some point. So after we hit our pilot season, this is some of the data that we collected. We were able to assist 34 unique individuals having a warm place to rest their head and warm their feet. We averaged about 2 guests per night. Our season high, we had 6 come in one evening. There were some evenings where we actually had to close, or we did close, due to no guests upon check-in. We are open from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. However, our check-in time is 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. So we don't have admittance after that. So they have a window where they can check in, where folks can check in. And if after 11 o'clock we really didn't have anybody there, we sent staff home because we wanted to do some cost savings there, and we were able to have some cost savings. We projected that would be about $90,000, and we came in at $72,000. The cost per stay was $226. The cost to stay open every evening was $503. That accounts for the entire year lease and the entire year utility payments, but just the staffing that's within that, because those are the costs of that whole building. Our projected budget, like I said, was $90,000 and came in at $73,000. That accounted for opening essentially for 7 days before November, closing for 7 days during the season, and actually closing 2 weeks early due to COVID-19 and us not being able to respond quick enough to those CDC guidelines. So in our Livingston Warming Center feasibility analysis, we looked over 3 different options for the community. So one being no action. The community can choose to take no action, and then and although that doesn't have any programmatic budget, there's still a cost associated with that. So we took a deeper dive and looked into that. When we looked at cost per night being, or cost per person being $226 per person, we thought, well, maybe there's a more economic way to do this. And if we do a state rate of $96 every evening for a motel, maybe that's a cheaper, more economic option. So we took a look at that. And then what would it take to run a full Livingston Warming Center model? No action. Obviously, there's a higher risk of health complications due to death. There's no place for folks to sleep. They are more susceptible and vulnerable to health, frostbite, other health complications, especially during COVID times. They're more exposed. We also did an annual cost of homelessness with this. That's very specific to chronic homelessness, those that have been homeless for a year or more. But to the community, we were able to show that on average, each person experiencing chronic homelessness actually costs the community and other public services and social services $28,000 annually to that community. So having the resources and a place where folks can have, one, a warm, safe place to stay decreases that cost and increases their engagement with housing services. We have housing counselors and housing navigators there. Again, our purpose is to make homelessness rare, brief, and one time, and moving people through that spectrum as quickly as possible. If they're working and they're not able to meet with a housing counselor during the day, then if we can meet them where they are, we were able to see an 80% increase in housing services just due to having a Livingston shelter. When we looked at the hotel motel voucher, it was more economic in cost. It was it comes out to be about $77,000 if you still only operate on a seasonal basis, November to March. We estimated about 5 stays per evening, and that's 7 nights a week, and broke down that cost. Some of the setbacks that we saw with a hotel motel vouchers, we actually lose some of that staff engagement. But a plus to having a hotel motel voucher is they actually would have shelter 24/7. We would need to go take a deeper dive into programmatically, is that like a 1 week stay that everybody gets? And then after that, that's the end of the assistance, or is it, and is it first come, first serve? And how do we limit those vouchers as well? So that's in that feasibility study, which I believe was sent out. But if you have any questions, please, I'm more than happy to answer. I'm just trying to read through this quickly. And on the Livingston Warming Center, if we did a full season model, we estimated it to be about just under $103,000. We can host up to eight guests per evening, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., and that increases our staff engagement. We feel really strongly that this is the best option, as it is a little bit more costly and there is a reduction in hours, but our ability to move folks through homelessness and into a stable home environment is pretty successful. Of the 34, we were able to confirm by the end of the season 13 were stably housed. And another 2 were able to enter into a treatment facility, which was the best housing option for them at that time. So we were able to move people through pretty quickly with the service engagement, and that's the point. We're not just trying to, although our primary purpose is a warm, safe place to stay, it's really the benefit of the housing counselors and the housing navigators engaging, meeting people where they are and giving them hope in that time that actually helps move them to a place of thriving as quickly as possible. So with that, there's just a couple of stories that we could tell, but for the sake of time, I think I'll pause and see if anybody has any questions regarding any of that so far. Yes, that should be.
Anyone have any questions? Okay, go ahead, Shari, continue, and we'll have questions at the end.
Wonderful. So part of this feasibility, the challenge of the warming center isn't, we have a few challenges. 1 is funding and 2 is staffing. So 1 being the funding piece is for the community for the size of Livingston, raising $102,000 for just 1 season is a pretty heavy load for the community donors. Most of our donors for shelter are, we have a lot of $25 and $50 donors. And I don't think that with donations of that size, that there's enough population to sustain a shelter model. So that's part of our feasibility study. We were, United Way did give another grant this season for $11,000 to go toward the Livingston shelter, which will help us open. We do have ESG Cares allocation that we're trying to prioritize currently. But what we really need is that community support. And so I would like to ask the commission today to consider funding the warming center. As you know, the greatest asset of your community is your people. And some of your people, whether they're working or they're on limited income because of their age or disabilities, they are struggling to find a place to live. And in those events, they need a shelter. And we are in the business of taking care of our neighbors, as is the city of Livingston. And so I would just ask to consider funding the Livingston shelter as a mechanism to take care of all of our neighbors.
Thank you, Shari. So Commissioner, do you have any questions to start? And or Michael, is there anything else like to ask?
I don't think there's anything else from our perspective, though.
Thank you. I do have one question, Shari. So when you analyze the data and work through the feasibility study, what was the group of people that helped make the decision and your recommendation?
We have a warming center advisory committee. I will just say that we don't have Livingston representation on that committee at this point. So it was the Livingston Warming Center Advisory Committee and our management team that reviewed the data after presented. As a community action agency, knowing that that's a gap in the housing continuum in Livingston anyway, and we're trying to fulfill that need. It also aligns with our strategic action plan and has been on our strategic action plan for 3 years that the board approved as well. So those are, we knew that we needed shelter. We did a pilot and we took it to our advisory committee, and here's our recommendation.
Great, thank you. Anyone else have a question yet?
Jarrell?
Go ahead, Mel.
A couple of things. First of all, we might be faced with the same pandemic coming up for this year into next year. So you're in the same spot you were when it first started. So that's one thing to consider. I work for Counterpoint part-time. I haven't done that during the pandemic, but we have 2 group homes with 8 people each. Both of those group homes are staffed 24 hours and a totally different program. But with the vouchers, if you had a system to fill out paperwork and give you an idea what the people are all about, you could work on that the same you would if you had your own place as far as the warming center goes. There are so many unknowns with this, and I'm looking at it. That's it. You know, it's not standing still, and so I understand your problem, but looking at what's going to be this year and next year, it's kind of hard to plan that, and the cost that you have is so much more than the vouchers. And I think with the vouchers, I think short term you could, you know, through paperwork and working with the people that way, provide a service. But what you're trying to do, it's a stretch to man that place and have the thing work. So I think it's a great idea, but I could see what you're running up against. But the cost is so much more than the voucher system. So that's what I have to say.
Yes, great points. And I will say when we presented this to the Park County Affordable Housing Coalition, that some of the feedback from Aspen was that they actually have done vouchers before and they were still able to engage in the hotel. So that was really great feedback. And then just speaking for the COVID requirements has forced us to take out the common space areas, but we're still able to have a capacity of 8 by spreading out. And we have a lot of cautionary, proactive processes and procedures that are now new that are in place. And then we also have, in the worst case scenario, our reactive procedures that we've reviewed with Gallatin County Health Department and haven't had a chance to review the Park County specific Park County Health Department with that. But great points.
Okay, anyone else? Go ahead, Melissa.
Thanks, Shari, for offering all this information. I just want to say first, I don't envy any of you that have to decide what's the best course of action to help people without homes right now. Even without a pandemic, there's so much to weigh and no answer is perfect. And they're all really expensive. So yeah, so thank you for that. And I know whatever you do will be appreciated and also criticized because there's no perfect thing. But I wanted to ask you, do you have an idea of how the pandemic and the sort of climate migration that we're seeing right now, do you have, like with the houses, they're all burning up and they can't be rebuilt fast enough and people are displaced to the Mountain West? Do you have an idea, or do you guys have any sort of predictions on how the demands of the warming center might be different this year? I know Quentin, the vice chair, it sounds like that he's been noticing some things working at the local, I don't know what you call it, Loaves and Fishes, that he's been seeing some responses to the pandemic. And I'm just wondering, like, if you all have some ideas.
Yeah, well, generally homelessness is just a percentage of our population because there's always that transitional homeless. So every community has 0.01 to 0.02 that are a percent of their community that are experiencing homelessness. And the more rural communities, it's less visible because they usually wrap around each other. And somebody notices that this person needs a place to stay and lets them stay in their, their aunt's house or just stay in their guest room or something. And so it's a little less visible in a more rural community. We have seen an influx of folks seeking shelter services, but not too huge. Like people that do not have a home aren't flocking to Montana by all means. because of how many homeless services we have. We're not a destination if you're experiencing homelessness. Everywhere is expensive, our housing stock's low. So at least we have that going for us. But we have seen an influx of people, small but still noticeable, of folks needing emergency housing assistance. And right now we don't have shelter anywhere. And the shelter that we'll have in Bozeman is still under construction. So we don't even have our normal shower and laundry services. So we have seen an increase of folks, but very, very small, but still noticeable. So if there is a large increase in our population, which because we are limited by our housing stock, it's a blessing and a curse, and we don't have that increase. Most of the influx that we're seeing is actually on the home buyer side, not the crisis side.
Anything else on that, Melissa, or questions, further questions?
No, thank you, Shari.
So I do have one other question regarding the population that are served. So you were saying it doesn't include the couch surfers, or the population data does not include them. Is that correct? And then, so what is the population that then uses the warming center the most? So that's, generally I'm going to just, from my perspective as an administrator in a school, families are homeless, right? And we see that because of our students. So it doesn't sound like the warming center is about a family having somewhere to go. It's more individuals. Am I correct in hearing that? Or could you clarify what the population looks like?
Yes, families are definitely welcome, but it's a demographic that we struggle with offering an inviting place to stay. We had, we had 54 families that we were working with last season experiencing homelessness in Gallatin County, and 0 of them came to our shelter. Some of the feedback, well, it seems pretty scary. If they had a vehicle, they just preferred to stay in their vehicle. They would try to double up. They were spending all of their savings and all of their income on hotels. So then they wouldn't have places to stay with kids in school. Particularly, we really try to engage with the homeless liaison within that school district, and they usually can carry the load for hotels for a while, and then we'll partner and help with that if we can. And then while we work on the other housing pieces, we also can offer rental assistance to help them get back on their feet and reestablish their savings and those pieces, and help out with a deposit. But yes, we definitely welcome all families to the warming center. If we had a family of 5 come in and we didn't have capacity, we would certainly get them into a hotel if we didn't have capacity at the warming center. But it is a demographic that we historically have not been able to offer of inviting enough space for them to utilize the shelter. And so we're really working on that with our new year-round shelter for Gallatin County, but that's still going to continue to be a struggle in Livingston.
Darrell?
Well, thank you, Shari. Go ahead, Mel.
I don't know if there's a connection here. We have a food resource center in town run by Michael McCormick. Is there anything that they're doing and you're doing? Is there any connection at all?
Absolutely. Michael McCormick and the Food Resource Center are amazing partners and such an amazing asset to the community. Michael has actually rented out the front space of where the warming center is at, and that's where they're making the bread. They installed a shower because it was really on its hard to make sure that people were meeting their basic hygiene needs, and so we're able to offer showers at the Warming Center, which is life-changing for folks to be able to shower. And so he was a huge partner in that. And then him and his volunteers were bringing food every morning, making sure that people had full bellies when they left, full warm bellies when they left, and snacks when they got there in the evening. So a huge community partner. We work with him a lot. He gives a lot of referrals, and I believe he's even walked somebody down and gave them a tour just so they're a little bit more comfortable coming into a shelter. We have this issue in Montana where we're a little stubborn and we don't want to reach out for help when it's needed. And so there's a little bit of pride that has to be put aside to enter shelter. So that type of warm handoff is essential to being able to offer that space.
Mm-hmm.
One last question from me, Shari. So I had.
Oh, can I just add to that? You know, I'm on the board of Meals on Wheels, and we do try to make extra meals and freeze them and offer them to the shelter as well.
Those were amazing, and they were gobbled up every evening. So thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Quentin. My question, one last question from me is, so you referenced wraparound services, which I know that the Food Resource Center does as well. I know it sounds like they're working with you to connect for housing, you know, for temporary housing or for the shelter, but they also do a wraparound services thing, and are we having overlap? What do we have, just so we're not, you know, too many people dealing with the same thing ends up with a lot of people not dealing with it. So what are your thoughts on that? And who do you work with, and how do you work through that?
Yeah, I would say that's a concern with many of the partners. We work really closely with the mental health providers and CHP, and we're really trying to connect those services. Right now we have what we call coordinated entry, and that's if somebody is isolated, is homeless, and that we have community partners that can meet together and discuss this one person. And even we don't have any, we have the church secretaries in Gallatin County and that group, and so a person actually can come and be represented and kind of consolidate those services. But I think in Livingston particularly, because of the proximity of some of those services right now and our relationship with all the other partners, that we already are able to discuss. If we are working with somebody in housing, if we do a housing counseling, we're already working on budget. If they say, hey, I already worked on a budget over at the Food Resource Center, great, let's pull that up really quick, and then let's get what we need from there, and where can you save money, and you know, what are our goals here? Or we really try to stay engaged with, you had an appointment at CHP last week, did you make it? Like, just kind of checking in and making sure that we're wrapping around that way. When we move to more of a permanent supportive housing, that's when we really engage as a team and do those more collaborative models of case management that's associated with that funding source. But with emergency shelter, we really do try to focus on the housing engagement and connecting with other services. And then usually they're excited to tell us when they did connect with other services, like, hey, just got my teeth, that bum tooth pulled out, like excited to tell us that they were able to engage in those places. But we try to take, you know, that wraparound service approach. I hope that answers your question, because right now I feel like I'm just babbling on.
That's great. Thank you, Shari. Any last questions for Shari? All right. Well, thank you.
I'll ask Shari a question. I'm pretty sure that it sounds like the city of Bozeman contributes to the Bozeman Warming Center? Are you able to share like yeah. I'm wondering like if you
So
can
the
share
city
what
of,
percentage of your costs are offset by the city of Bozeman for the Bozeman shelter.
yeah, so the city of Bozeman contributes to, I believe they contributed $40,000 to hunger and homelessness. And so that helps cover, that doesn't have to necessarily be the Bozeman, it does not necessarily have to be the shelter. It can be like, it also helps cover costs for our Pay What You Can restaurant, the Fork and Spoon. And it also helped offset some of our transportation costs for our secondary location. So it was $40,000, and which is not a lot when you take that bigger scope of hunger and homelessness, because those are some pretty big services that are covered in Gallatin County. But that's still a lot. I don't want to downplay that. That's still a lot that they contribute. But as a percentage of those budgets, it's smaller. The Warming Center and Bozeman's budget, because we had to run 2 locations, we were at capacity with one location only had capacity for 42, and we averaged 66 people per evening. So we had to run 2 different locations. That ended up being nearly $250,000 for the season.
Thank you, Shari. I know that's like an impossibly difficult question, like all of these are, but thank you. That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, it still was super helpful to maintain like our lights on. Like we could justify that portion that helped keep our lights and the heat on, and it was it's still an amazing contribution and gets us through the season. Absolutely.
It's a lot of money, but Bozeman's needs are much greater than Livingston because Bozeman has a different set of issues, for sure. Thank you. So I get that it's a lot, but overall, it's just a tiny sliver of what you're doing. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And anyone else? All right, thank you, Shari, for your time tonight. And we will look into the potential for funding.
Thank you. I appreciate all your time.
Thank you. All right, we're moving on we have one public hearing tonight. We have ordinance number 2088, an ordinance of the City Commission of the City of Livingston, Montana, amending section 14-92 as enacted by ordinance number 1908, regulating the user charge basis for the Livingston Sewer System. Mr. Cardus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So as you said, this will be a public hearing after it's introduced. So this is the second reading. We looked at this last time. I will try and share this with you real quick. So the ordinance 2088, the title that you read, basically what it means is we're going to change the basis on how we charge sewer. We're not changing the rate at all. We're just changing how we structure that bill. Most people that are familiar with their sewer bill know that we average their usage in December, January, and February, and then that average is used through the following February, where we average those 3 months again. We're looking to change that a little bit, one, because it caused some problems. That's a very small amount of time to average their use over. So there had to be a lot of exceptions that had to be accounted for. People that were away during the winter, people that had water leaks during 1 month. When you average over such a short time, each month has a significant impact on that average. So really what we're looking to do is have a winter billing cycle and a summer billing cycle. The winter billing cycle, instead of using an average, we'll use actual water use. That will be for the October through March billing periods. And then we will, using those winter months, so October through March, establish what their residential average is. So it'll either be the average they use during those months, or if you're a resident that's gone during the winter, the minimum average you can have is 100 gallons per day. That average will be then used during the summer billing period, which will go from April through September. And so April through September, you will either pay for your residential average use, so what we calculated during the rest of the year, Or if your actual use is less than your average, we'll just charge you for your actual use. So it's a I think a more equitable way of charging people for what they actually use, and will certainly simplify the process as far as calculating what that average is and make it a little more accurate average.
All right. So I will now open the public hearing. This public hearing on ordinance number 2088 is now open. Do we have any public comment? Please go ahead and put your name in the chat if you do, or state your name and address. I'm gonna jump in. Any public comment? Okay. This public hearing is now closed. Commissioners, any questions or comments on ordinance 2088?
Melissa here. I don't have any questions. I feel like we went over this in detail and asked a lot of questions the last time, just for the people who might not have been at that meeting. We did do that last time, and I don't have any new questions.
Agreed, Melissa. Anyone else?
I'd just like to add that I think that this system or approach would be a much more equitable pricing guide or billing guide than the old one. Thank you.
Thanks, Warren.
Actually, Darrell, I'm sorry. There's one thing that just popped in my head.
Go ahead, Melissa.
At the last meeting, I think you said you wanted to see like a potential example of what this might look like.
Yes, thank you for reminding. Michael, did you have an example?
We haven't built one yet. We're in the process of working it, but we will include it. It'll be 30 days before this takes effect, and we're going to include it on our website before the billing goes into place.
Okay.
So that's,
Go ahead, Melissa.
so just to clarify, we won't get the example before a vote?
We haven't been able to construct it yet. In general, it will be based off of actual use, so it's going to vary greatly depending on the user. We can use an example user, but it's not going to show someone what their bill would look like unless they look at their actual use. Do you have something to add, Paige?
I do. I actually went through and did a sample of some different household sizes, properties. So I have a household of 4 versus a family of 2 versus snowbird versus a trailer. Family of 4, it actually went down about $75 annually. The rest of them, it really didn't make a significant difference with the exception of the snowbird. And really the big change in the snowbird was the change in a connection fee. So historically a snowbird calls in and says, we're leaving, we're going to Arizona for the winter. Please shut our water and sewer off. And during those months, we charge them $0. We still have all of the cost of maintaining that infrastructure, even if they're not using the system during those months. So they won't be charged for actual usage, but they will continue to be charged a connection fee during those periods. So that is really where we saw the biggest increase, because they went from being charged a connection fee of $0 for 3 or 4 months out of the year to being charged the base $18.94 for those 3 or 4 months that they weren't occupying their home.
Can I ask a question to that, Darrell?
Yes, go ahead.
Do you have a general idea, just out of curiosity, Paige, like how many properties that is, like for snowbirds? Because I know $18.94 doesn't seem like very much probably, but I'm guessing it's a lot of money when you add up how many snowbirds might live here.
There's not as many as you would think. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but
that's okay.
Yeah,
Thank
we
you.
don't have tons of them.
Okay, any other questions? All right, thank you, Paige. That was helpful. So I think we're up for a vote. Do we have a motion on ordinance number 2088?
I make a motion, we pass ordinance number 2088.
And I want to thank Paige Federhoff, and I'll make a second.
We have a motion by Friedman and a second by Newts. Roll call, please.
Mayor Hoagland,
Yes.
Commissioner Schwartz,
Or,
Commissioner Friedman,
Or,
Commissioner Maybe,
4,
Commissioner Newts.
4.
Motion passes. Next on our agenda, we have ordinances, and tonight we have 3 ordinances. Our first is ordinance number 2089, an ordinance for the Commission of the City of Livingston, Montana, amending ordinance number 1968, 1972, and 2041 as codified by Chapter 24 of the Livingston Municipal Code entitled Development Impact Fees. Mr. Cardus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So over the past few agendas, we did accept or went through the impact fee study that was presented to us. The way it's currently written in our code, we actually have what impact fee study we reference when setting fees embedded in the code. So we have to update the code before we can actually use that study to set fees. And that's what this ordinance does. Again, all of these, this ordinance and the ones that follow, this is the first reading, and there'll be a public hearing at our next meeting. But starting on page 59 in your packets is where this starts. And if you go through, what you'll see is we have struck out all the references to a specific report, and we've changed it a little bit to define the report as the most current impact fee study approved by the commission. What that will do is in the future, as you approve the future studies, we won't have to change the ordinances to update and to be able to use it. It just basically means once you accept that into our library, that becomes the basis for setting fees because we've defined it that way. So instead you have to go back through the ordinance and change each reference in the ordinance. We just redefined it in a way that it just says the most recent impact fee study approved by the commission. Other than that, I don't think there's any significant changes. We changed a little bit of the application process to clean it up. We changed some approvals of waivers from the director to the city manager to make sure that we were looking at the right level before we waived any impact fees. And that is pretty much it. So it's mostly administrative changes, but the main item is accepting the new impact fee study as the basis for setting impact fees going forward.
Thank you. So Michael, I want you to also say this out loud because some people assumed in this or in this discussion that it is about changing impact fees at the right now. Like we're increasing impact fees or we're not, or that it's related to that. This ordinance is not. But this gives up, I'm going to try put it into like, you know, the rest of us speak, that this is the information, the impact fee study is the information that we'll then use to rewrite potentially our impact fees.
That's absolutely correct. This does not change any fees themselves. This just says, hey, this is our updated study and we'll use it when we make a decision on whether or not to change fees. So it does not change any fees at this time.
All right, perfect, thank you. So do we have any public comment on ordinance number 2089?
Jonathan Hedinger, 519 West Park Street.
Go ahead, Jonathan.
I just wanted to comment on a couple things. I was just looking, I guess, at the document, and I saw that active transportation was added under public facilities, number 3, and I just thought that was good, and I was glad to see that the city is putting active transportation in the language, and I thought that's exciting. And then I just wanted to also comment or ask, I guess, what the process is kind of going forward for setting those impact fees, and what types of things could be looking at changing, because I know that we've heard in the Park County Community Foundation's Housing Coalition, we've heard about some progressive ways that you can use impact fees to help fund things like more affordable housing or something like that. And I just wondered if something like that would be explored. So thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Could you help clarify how then we move forward with this information towards making a decision in the future? And
thank you, Madam.
Yeah, whatever else Jonathan said.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, so absolutely, these will be, everything will be looked at going forward. The basis for the fees are established in the study, but the commission will have to set fees by resolution. So we anticipate in the future, this is the first reading, we'll have to go through the public hearing next meeting, and then 30 days later it will take effect. At that point, the commission, if they'd like to change impact fees, that's when we'll look at that process. And we'll look at the recommendations in the report, and then the commission will decide if they like to use the recommendations, if they would like to use something between current and in the recommendation, or stick with the current impact fees. They are significantly different, although I'm not sure they're a significant percentage of a average house cost right now, but those are the issues that we'll have to talk through when we actually look at changing the fees.
Thank you, Michael. Any other public comment on ordinance number 2089? All right, any commissioner comments?
Sure, I'll go.
Go ahead, Melissa.
So I have some language that I think it would be nice to address, some different language in the updates. So on page 61, this is, I'm going to try to make it make sense. So it's section 24-1, letter F. It's on page 61 of the agenda. Yep, that's it. Thank you. So the purple part on the very bottom, it says expand the capacity of the City of Livingston infrastructure to accommodate current or future growth. It seems to me that it might be more accurate to say to accommodate the growth or impact incurred by this development. As opposed to general current and future growth. I believe impact fees should really be tied to the impacts of that specific development, not hypothetical developments in the future. So that's the first thing I personally would like to see changed, or I guess evidence to show me that that's not the case. The next thing that I marked that I have questions about are on page 66 of the agenda. So this is section 24-5. There's an edit to change the document determining the capital system improvement projects from the capital improvements plan, which I think we still have a capital improvements plan. That's one of my questions. To the strategic plan. So Michael, could you maybe explain like what this document means by capital and system improvements, and if we still have a capital improvements plan?
Sure. There's no current capital improvement plan. Capital improvement plan we did is outdated at this point. A lot of it's enrolled into the strategic plan, which is why the edit was placed there. But the capital or system improvement really applies to infrastructure, whether that's physical infrastructure such as sewer, water, streets, parks, but it can also be system capacity such as law enforcement, fire, recreation, items like that. So those would all fall under capital or system improvements.
Thank you. So I guess what I would like to see here, since it sounds like we're updating based on what's the contemporary way of the city working by changing to strategic plan, I would like to see us include the growth policy. Since the growth policy also works on the things that you named, it helps highlight those things from the citizen perspective. The next thing, okay, you answered that question, so I can skip that. You answered it before you even knew I asked it. I was asking it. This might just be a typo or I'm misunderstanding something. So this is on page 70. It's section 24-9, the administration of impact fee. So it says the finance officer, so that's Paige, is going to do keeping track of the financial records, which makes sense. And it's all the projects in 24-1 letter E. And then I was confused because I went back to 24-1 letter E. And that is on page 61. And that is providing the legal and procedural basis for the implementation of development impact fees within the city. So is that referencing the correct thing that Paige is supposed to be tracking? Or the finance officer is supposed to be tracking?
I think it should be F instead of E.
Okay, thank you. Well, then that would be a suggestion I would make, would be to update that to F. And then, so you answered that question as well. The next thing I guess I'll save that one. I guess I only have 2 left, so there's nothing left to save. So there's quite a few places where it's changing the not the public works, I'm sorry. The head of the building department. So ours is building/planning department in Livingston. Probably when this was made, it was 2 separate departments. I think we have a history of those departments coming together and apart. Or maybe different employees doing different roles. But I'm wondering why those are changed to city manager. I guess when I'm thinking about the difference in role for city manager and the planning or building department, the equivalent, these things to me seem like the equivalent of fees, like building permit fees. Like this is something that would happen in the process of building permit fees, or even like something that's at the level of like working on the findings of fact. It doesn't seem to me like it rises to the level of the city manager, but rather when I think about these specific tasks, they seem like the planning director, the building department director's role. So I'm wondering, and there's quite a few that are changed, at least 3, 4, I think 3. So that's changing the role for a few things to the city manager, putting him more in the weeds on these topics, or her, depending on who the city manager would be. So that's another thing it might be nice to discuss. And then the last thing that I would really like to see updated is on page 73. So this is under section, or maybe it just, this particular one is under section 24-13. So there was a rule for the city commission before on the previous page. It's crossed out that if there was a fee change or a fee waiver, that would come before the city commission, and the commission would have to help determine which fund was going to pay that difference. So I'm wondering why that edit. And then I'm also on page 73. It's the purple part. I think that the purple part basically was, this big addition is kind of like reorganizing a big chunk that was deleted in a different section. But the approval of the individualized assessment will not adversely affect the strategic plan of the city. I would also add that the individualized assessment would not would not conflict with the growth policy. I would add that as well. I would like to see that added as well. And those are all the things that jumped out at me that I think would be nice to address if we're updating this, or talk that out as a commission. Thanks, Darrell.
Thank you, Melissa. I think you have a lot of points, I think, that could be answered or brought to Michael for an answer, or to the city. Melissa, do you want to, how do you want to move forward with some of your questions and reflections on this?
I mean, it's on the agenda right now, so I think we can have a conversation about it.
I mean, do you want to ask individually? Do you want to stop and go through each of them? Yeah, we're in that moment of discussing it, but how do you want to proceed with, because you had multiple.
Well, if it takes more time, we can move it to the next agenda or move it to a future agenda if it takes more time than we have at this meeting.
No, I think you have some really valid questions and points, and I think we need to either have those additions added in for then further discussion later, or we go through them now. It's going to be one or the other, and it's up to you on how you want to proceed on the, addressing some of, even if we wanted to address a few of them now.
Yeah, I think, Darrell, I guess I would like to hear from the other commissioners as well. Since I think I might have been the first person to comment. There might be overlap, and other commissioners might think this is important to do now or not. So I guess since we share our time in this space, I'd like to hear what other people want.
Okay, I'm opening it to other commissioners first. Does anyone have any thoughts? I do have a few questions, but I want to hear from others as well.
I'd like to see a more exact or precise readout or printout of what the questions are. Each point where a change is being suggested. I see some of the adding the growth policy to the strategic plan would seem to make sense, but I really couldn't follow exactly all of the points that change was made or any other change was made. So I'd like to see something that I'm not disagreeing with it. I just like to know exactly what each point is. Thank you.
Thanks, Warren.
Madam,
Yeah, go ahead, Quentin.
yeah, that in keeping with what Warren said, I wouldn't mind going through point by point the things that Melissa brought up, and yay or nay, the basically 5 or 6 changes she's looking at. That's my opinion. I'll let you run with that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think that's why, Melissa, I'm thinking that we should start sort of at the beginning of your concerns. I think there's along the way, there's also, or let me restate that, not concerns, but some changes that in observations. There's other things along the way I'd like to address, but I almost feel like we have to look through this either fully from start to end again, or tonight, with not necessarily fully detailed, but at least sections and addressing those sections, and then kind of reflecting on that, and then stopping and discussing along the way, like your main concerns or your main changes that you'd like in other commissioners. Do you think we should move forward like that, everyone?
Darrell,
Yep, Mel?
this is going to be rewritten the next time we see it. Is that my understanding? You're going to have a cleaner document to look at than we have right now?
Well, not necessarily, because it's a public, it will be the first reading of the public hearing. And I write on the timeline, everyone, or on Michael. And so we could still have changes added in to the next hearing, or to the first hearing. And the final document wouldn't be for this until the one.
That's what I'm thinking about. I mean, we're going to see it a couple more times. We'll see a cleaned up copy. I think the next time make a little more sense than what we're looking at now.
Yeah, I like the slash throughs personally. I think it helps to understand what we're changing, and I like that kind of mess that helps kind of see what was and what we are looking forward to in the future. What do you guys think? I was proposing that either we address it now, or we wait until later and add these things to it for consideration in the future.
Yeah.
Madam Chair,
Go ahead.
Michael, do you see any adverse effects to going through this now, or any of the proposed changes that Melissa made that she would like to see made to this document?
No, I think actually they're fairly straightforward. I think we could discuss them. You guys could decide if you wanted to change them or not, and then I could include them in the draft for the public hearing.
Thank you, Michael. And I think now is the time to do it. I mean, we're just pushing it down the road. We don't have that. Melissa doesn't have that many things listed that I don't think we can't go through real quick and adopt at this time. Thank you.
Okay. So we'll add to it and have it ready for the public hearing, the notes and the information that first Melissa had added. One of the main questions I have, Michael, and I can't see the whole document why did we first of all change from some of the wording from director to city manager? I would like to have that question answered, I guess, before we move forward.
Sure. So the direction that was in there basically gave the building department, or the director of the building department at the time, the discretion on whether or not to charge impact fees, which affects other departments. So the building director could say, no, we don't need impact fees for the police department or the fire department or the rec department or parks or water or sewer. We thought it was more appropriate because impact fees affect a bunch of different departments across the entire city, that the building director would bring that recommendation to the city manager, and then the city manager should have the larger picture of what impact fees are needed or not needed for different departments. And we could sit down and have that conversation, come to a conclusion, and then the city manager would make the determination on it.
Okay, and is there any reference to like a norm in regards to Montana code and how other cities have done, like how do other cities look at this? And is there any reference to Montana code annotated?
I don't think there's a standard, and I couldn't tell you if there was a norm across other cities. I know depending on how they're structured, a lot of it will depend if they have a board in charge of that section, what their form of government is. And some forms of government, the mayor may make that decision. And in general, because we're a commissioner manager form, most of those decisions should lie with the manager, because if they lie below the manager, the commission doesn't really have an input to it, because the commission interacts with the manager. That's where your input comes. If a director does something that the city manager can't oversee, then the commission kind of loses that avenue of communication and influence to that decision, because they can't go directly to the staff member. And if the code gives that authority to the director and not to the city manager, then the city manager can't change that decision either. So it's just cleaner in the commissioner manager form of government that the manager is responsible for those, and in that case is responsible to the commission for those decisions.
I have a question about that.
Please do.
My understanding is that as the city manager, it's your authority to oversee all the departments. So how is it possible that any department head could make decisions and you wouldn't have access to the decisions that they're making? Because it's my understanding if department heads are making bad decisions, you have the authority to guide them, discipline them, or fire them. So I'm having trouble seeing like how you wouldn't still be overseeing that.
If you look at the responsibilities of the city manager, it basically says to make responsible for all decisions not otherwise specified in code. So if you as a city commission say the city manager doesn't have the authority to do that, then the city manager doesn't have the authority to do that. We went through that same process when we talked about parade routes, where in the ordinance that is directly given to the chief of police and not the city manager. And so the city manager doesn't have the authority to step in and change those decisions. So it's just cleaner usually to give that authority to the manager, because unlike the city manager who has no protection under Montana state employment laws, department heads do. And I can't fire a department head for doing something that is expressly given to their authority by the city commission.
That's a very helpful example. Thank you. Do you, not currently, but historically, has this been a challenge in Livingston where maybe, because it looks like there was a big chunk that was taken out of this, red lines through it, where it looked like there was basically a ton of leeway given to waivers. It's like half a page long or something. And so I'm wondering if that, like, it sounds like maybe that's been a challenge in some municipalities, or maybe even in our city in the past, where things were waived and then it did impact other departments.
In general, we haven't had a challenge with that here, but the code was pretty poorly worded. You noted earlier that there was a big section of purple code that looked like it had been moved. That is exactly the code that we're talking about now. That big section of red code was moved to a different section to just make it line up and be a little easier to follow for people that are trying to follow the process. So it's not that it's a problem here or that we made a huge change to it. We just changed where it was and streamlined the process a little bit.
It looked like there was maybe more individual assessment allowed though. Like that section changed a little bit where it wasn't like you can just ask for a waiver for no reason, justify that, and then potentially have your fees waived. And maybe I'm oversimplifying what that code says, but that's kind of like, it seems like that was part that was tightened up a little bit.
Yeah, and so it was actually kind of almost repeated in the code. There was a place where you could go for individual assessment, but there was also a place you could go for a waiver, when really those are basically the same thing. And so we just got rid of the individual assessment piece and said, if you don't want to pay your full impact fees, then you have to ask for a waiver. Whether that's a full or partial waiver, it doesn't matter. And in the end, you'd end up with a very similar result as asking for an individual assessment.
And can I ask on the waiver request, I can't find it right now because I'm sort of looking at the big book today as well as the screen, but when that waiver request is submitted, who do they submit it to, and is that covered in here? I don't recall seeing it, but I might have missed it. And then who approves it?
So here's the example of how that's done now. So basically we placed it under appeals. So the notice of appeal has to be filed with the director still, because that's the way the paperwork should go. The director and his or her duly designated agent shall evaluate it. And then the decision is actually the DIFAC, which if we go back up to right here, it is the city shall establish a development impact fee advisory committee. And that's composed of 3 citizens of the city of Livingston with the following qualifications. One's a certified public accountant, one's a member of a development community, and one person who may or may not be a city employee is qualified to the satisfaction of the city commission. And I think this was brought before you when we started the impact fee study. We do have a 3-member development impact fee advisory committee, and any appeals would go before them. And that's in accordance with the state law quoted here.
So just to then clarify that, the way that impact fees can be waived is they're brought through the committee. The committee can approve or disapprove, and then it goes back to the city with that recommendation. Does it come to the commission?
Whether or not it comes to the city commission is up to the appellant or the person making the appeal. The DIFAC, so the committee would come back with their decision, and that is final unless appealed to the city commission within 10 days. So if they don't like the decision of the DIFAC, then they can appeal it to the city commission, and then it would come before you.
All right. When we've had fee waivers in general, you know, when we've had some building fee waivers, that's separate from impact fees. And I think sometimes people mix those up. And I know I have in the past, but they're separate. So fee waivers will continue to come before the commission. Impact fees will continue going through this process. Correct?
That is correct. Yep. In fact, I think in our next agenda, or maybe the one after that, we're actually going to sit down and go through the fees and set up an actual policy on how the commission would like to go through who waives what type of fee and in what way. Because while there's kind of a norm that we've used, we haven't actually set that down in our code or a policy. So that's something we're going to address here in the next couple of meetings.
Okay. So any other additions and or questions? Melissa or anyone else on some concerns, questions?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mel.
It seems like when I first talked about it, that's what we're going to head anyway, would be much clearer, unless I'm wrong.
What do you say?
You're going to see everything on the next time, and I think that's the time that we really look at it. But I mean, that's what I'm looking at now. I don't know.
Yeah, and I would say we generally do it the opposite way. We talk it through the first time a lot, and then we are to a place where everyone likes what's happening, and then we make a decision. But in this case, it's a pretty complicated, highly informational document. So I think it needs some time for sure.
Madam Chair?
Yep, go ahead.
If I may, I think I can address most of Commissioner Nutz's questions. And then if you'd like, we can put any changes into the draft for next time. I think you covered the one about city manager and director fairly well. If you guys have more questions on that, please let me know. But I think her first question was on page 61. And it was the wording about how to accommodate current or future growth. I would just suggest that we say expand the capacity of the city of Livingston infrastructure and end the sentence there. Because that is what impact fees are for. They're to expand infrastructure. And the wording might just be confusing. We could just delete the rest of the sentence and it would be specific to the capacity of the infrastructure. And again, that doesn't apply to just physical infrastructure, but also the systems infrastructure of law enforcement or fire or rec or parks. Does that sound acceptable?
Madam Chair?
Yeah, go ahead, Quentin.
Yeah, as Michael goes through these, each individual one like he's doing, I would like to be able to weigh in on each one, and specifically this one where Michael suggested that added. I agree with that.
Okay. Melissa, does that appease you as far as you're concerned?
No, mostly because it went from being more specific with the red to super general. And so I want to make sure that when we're talking about impact fees, we're really tying it into the project that is paying that impact fee. So I want to make sure that the impact fees are paying for the impacts incurred by that specific development. So, I mean, previously it was really like listed out specific capital improvements that would be funded. And so just saying infrastructure generally, I think means that the money could potentially go anywhere. But I think my take from the people of Livingston is they really want to know that development is covering the cost of that development. And that's what impact fees are designed to do. Not cover the cost of development generally, but to cover the cost of their own impacts to the rest of the community.
Mm-hmm.
It's like what Michael said, whether it's a pipe under a road or whether it's the capacity of the police force, whatever it is. So that's why I guess I think it should be really like the impact incurred by this development, like tying it back specifically to that development and not to growth generally or impacts generally.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Michael, do you have any thoughts on that? I think that is a major concern people bring to us.
And I think the intent of impact fees is certainly to mitigate the impact of certain growth. But if you tie it to a specific project, you're going to be very restricted in what you can use that for. You know, how can I tie? It's going to be difficult to tie the expansion of the police station to one specific development. You can't say that we need another officer now because of this development, or we need another office because of this development, or we need an additional rec program because of this development. It makes more sense for sewer and water and streets, and a lot of those do go directly to those projects, but a lot of times it's impact fees from multiple developments that go into possibly upgrading a choke point in the sewer system that's not anywhere close to that development, but that development uses in harmony with 5 or 6 other developments. So yes, you do want to offset the impacts of that specific development, but if you specifically say it can only be spent on the things that are directly affected by that development, you are going to lose the opportunity to pay for what's referred to in other parts as the orderly growth and development of the city. And so, yes, we absolutely want to put it towards development, but if you put it towards a specific development, I think you're going to be very limited in how you can spend those funds. And even the old red portion doesn't limit it to anything tied to a specific development. It just says anything that's in the capital improvement plan. So anything that was across town in the capital improvement plan would qualify under the old language. It was fairly vague before. It was just using a different list. You know, we could certainly, and I think we do tie it to some of our other documents throughout throughout this ordinance, but you want to have the flexibility to spend those impact fees in places that multiple developments might be affecting, not just a single development.
Could it be written in a way that states both? Especially, I think, you know, one of the complaints that we hear a lot as a commission is, you know, developers in the past had promised things that didn't really get fulfilled. And then the current owners of the properties are hoping for a change and hoping for, you know, construction of roads or, you know, finishing of roads. And so is there any way that we could state it to include the area as well as that expanded need that happens with development?
I'm unsure exactly how we would word that. If you look up on part C, it talks about their proportionate share of the cost of public facilities needed to serve new growth. So that's kind of what we're talking about, where they pay for a share of other projects in other places, but that they would benefit from. Even if it wasn't their impact that caused it, they would benefit from a new park, or they would benefit from additional fire capacity. So part of the challenge with impact fees is it's not for improving current facilities. So like you couldn't take a road and pave it, an unpaved road, and pave it with impact fees, because it doesn't actually expand the capacity unless you were going to widen the road or do something else to, you know, if you were going to add some other feet to it. In general, those kind of projects are done through the special improvement district process, whether that's new sewer, new water, you know, paved streets. Then the actual developments or the people in those areas directly pay for the improvements to their infrastructure. So it's kind of taken care of under that process. You know, some ideas of where impact fees could go, again, depending on the impact fee, it really needs to go to projects that expand the capacity of the infrastructure. Definitely, if there's a need in the area that is being developed, that's where that money would go, and it needs to be tied to it. But if there's a general need that benefits the entire city, you could also use it in that area. I just don't think we want to get too specific to tie our hands on where it could go. You still have to give a report every year on where impact fees are spent, so it needs to make sense and that can be reviewed. But it's difficult to word it so you're both specific and general at the same time, I think.
So you can't, okay, go ahead, Melissa.
I was just going to ask Michael, could you repeat what your suggestion was?
Yeah, I was just suggesting to cut off all the language about growth, and so basically just end it after expand the capacity of the city of Livingston infrastructure.
What do you think of that? Too
I mean,
big?
yeah, I mean, I think it's fine. Like Mel said, we're going to see this again, and it'll be easier when the edits are incorporated to look at it. You know,
Yeah.
So I think that's fine to just put it where Michael said for now, and then we're going to look at it, and it'll be easier when we've had time to process and see the edited version. So
Yeah.
I'm fine with that for now, and to keep moving on in the interest of time. It's actually 7 o'clock, Darrell, so would you entertain a motion for a 5-minute recess?
Yep.
I
Let's
will
take
make a
5-minute
motion.
break.
Second.
Great. Motion by Newts and a second by Schwartz. Roll call.
Chair Hoagland,
Yes.
Commissioner Schwartz,
4.
Commissioner Friedman,
4.
Commissioner Maybe,
4.
Commissioner Newts.
Or
Motion passes, and I guess we didn't have to do that. All right, 5 minutes. Thank you.
Wait a minute.
take a 5-minute break.
Okay, we're back. Okay, any other additions or thoughts on our impact fee study and I guess our ordinance and changes to the language?
Do you want me to bring up the next point, Darrell?
Yeah, please.
Okay, it was on page 66, section 25, or sorry, 24-5. I would just add and growth policy behind strategic plan. What's that?
You said 66.
Yes.
The lighting in this space is not very good.
So it's 24-5. And it was updated from capital improvements plan to strategic plan. I would just add and growth policy.
I would like to see that as well. That's a great point, and I think a good addition.
I agree.
Well, they're typically in agreement. Sometimes the growth policy, I expect the growth policy will be much bigger and broader than the strategic plan.
Exactly.
Yeah. Are you ready for the next?
Go ahead.
Okay. The next one was just that that edit on page 70. It was listed, this is section 24-9, letter C. It says project specified in 24-1, letter E, and Michael said it should be F, not E. So I would just obviously change that.
Right.
I feel like we've spent a lot of time already discussing city manager versus director. I don't know if that really warrants any more conversation.
I do think that in the end, I need to be more comfortable with it to make sure we're going through the right route, but I feel like I need more information, and I respect the information we've already received. So
yeah, I guess I would just say let's leave it as is for now, and we can discuss it again the next time.
Yes.
The next point I said a bit less precisely than I could have. So what page is my form? 72? Yes. So this part was omitted that he's pointing to right now. Or wait, no, that's my pointer. Never mind. It's the red part up above. I got my mouse and his mouse. Yeah, that's it. So I think I probably know why that's got a line through it, but I don't want to make any assumptions. So that would be a good conversation to have. Why is that line through? Having the city commission, when there's a fee waiver, talk about which fund. I have a guess, but I'd like to hear it from Michael.
Michael, could you go ahead?
Sure. So the way this was written, it was really a backhand way to try and prevent the commission from allowing waivers or credits or exemptions. Because basically what it said is if we waive your sewer and water fee on a development, then the city has to pay that into the impact fee fund from the general fund or the sewer fund or the water fund. So basically the city had to pay the impact fee and restrict where that money could be used instead of just waiving the fee, which is kind of a weird backwards way of doing things. Instead of just saying, okay, we think this is a important enough project that we're willing to waive the fees on it, and then just going forward from there. In this case, it actually required not only waiving the fee, but then using another fund to pay into the impact fee funds, which I think is I don't think the commission would want to be restricted by that.
Thanks for clarifying. I don't have a suggested edit for that. the last point that I would edit would be on page 73. So this is under section 24-3 appeals, letter B, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. So under 4, yep, that's the one. So an assessment will not adversely affect the strategic plan of the city. I would say, or I would suggest, will not adversely affect the strategic plan of the, nor conflict with the growth policy.
I agree.
My final remark would be, if we are now talking about the strategic plan and the growth policy, it might make sense to make this document more complete to the next round of people that will undertake editing it. To go back to in the very beginning on section 24-2, there's a huge list of definitions for all sorts of things that probably change meaning over time. Maybe we should just add the growth policy and the strategic plan to that list of definitions. So the next round of people that look at this will know what was in our brains when we did this. I don't think that requires me to give definitions right now. I'm sure that that's something city staff can do.
Yeah, I like it. It's a good idea. Okay, is that it?
Yes, and I think that's great conversation. I really appreciate all of the critical thinking about these things. So thank you, all of you, for participating in critical thinking.
Thank you for getting those ideas down, and very well thought out. So moving on, we need to have a motion.
Make a motion, we table ordinance 2089 for the next meeting.
Well, I think we want to move it forward. So then you would make a motion to pass or to approve, and then it approves it for the public hearing, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so can you restate that again, Mel? To approve?
Well, yeah, I want to pass ordinance number 2089 to be revisited at the next meeting with a more specific wording.
Okay, we have a motion by Friedman.
Second.
And a second by Maybe. Roll call, please.
Chair Hoagland,
Yes.
Commissioner Schwartz,
Or
Commissioner Friedman,
4.
Commissioner Maybe,
Yes.
Commissioner Newts.
Yes.
Motion passes. Next on our agenda, we have ordinance number 2090, an ordinance of the City Commission of the City of Livingston, Montana, amending Article 2, Article 4, and Article 5, Chapter 30 of the Livingston Municipal Code entitled Zoning as Pertains to Accessory Dwellings. Mr. Cardes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So again, this is the first reading of a change to our zoning ordinance. The general purpose of this ordinance is to allow accessory dwelling units throughout the city. Right now, we allow them in all residential zoned areas. Highway commercial too? I'm sorry, not R3, R1 and R2. So anything that isn't zoned high density currently. It allows basically a smaller unit in the back, but I'll leave out the details because we actually have Matthew on here tonight. For those of you that haven't met Matthew, he's our assistant planning director. we were lucky enough to get him from Gallatin County, where he's had a lot of experience with ADUs at Big Sky and around the county as well. So he was the lead on drafting this, and I'm gonna let him give you his take on it. Matthew, thank you.
Hi, I'm Matthew, for those of you who don't know. I'm basically going to go through a summary of the staff report I gave you, sort of hitting the highlights here. So the first point is, what is an ADU? Essentially, it's an accessory dwelling unit. They're also called mother-in-law suites, granny flats, and they're secondary smaller units on a property that would not require additional lot area. So currently within the city zoning, if you have 2 dwelling units, you need basically 2 lot areas to do so. Generally, they're occupied by family members or renters. Specifically in this zoning requirement, they're not allowed to be sold separately unless you do have that additional lot acreage, and then they could be subdivided off. But if you are building an ADU on a lot that does not have the required lot square footage for 2 dwelling units, you would not be able to sell that separately. It would have to be rented. They're often found over alley-loaded garages or in the basement of existing homes. Historically, alley-loaded carriage houses containing space for a carriage, or in this case, a car, on the ground floor and a dwelling unit on the second were common in Livingston and other cities in the Western United States. And you can still find many of these if you tour through the alleys in town. Many cities and states throughout the US have modified their zoning regulations to allow municipal housing and as an option to allow older adults to age in place, generally in proximity to their families. Currently, ADUs are not allowed in any zoning district in the city of Livingston. To do a secondary dwelling unit, you would need that additional square footage on the lot as required by zoning. So why has this come up now? Why are we looking at this? Based on the American Community Survey, Livingston's population has seen accelerating population growth over the last 5 years. The percent growth year over year has grown every year between 2014 and 2018. 2018 is the last year we have reliable American Community Survey data, so you'll hear that year a lot. This increase in growth has been coupled with a decrease in residential vacancy rates. Again, vacancy rates have declined every year in that 5-year period between 2014 and 2018. And with the decrease in residential vacancy, we've seen an increase in monthly median rents, specifically a very large increase between 2017 and 2018, which was 16% increase in that cost in that 1-year period. Currently, median rents, or not currently, I should say, in 2018, median rents were estimated at just under $800 a month. As part of the citizen outreach survey for the growth policy, rental housing was identified as the greatest housing need in Livingston, despite the fact that 72% of those respondents self-identified as homeowners. The ACS data also concurs with this conclusion. In 2018, at the time of survey, there were 24 vacant rental units in Livingston, which was actually up from 0 in 2017. So this data all points to the need for a significant amount of rental housing in Livingston to accommodate the growth and the increase in cost for rental units within the city. The proposed amendment achieves this goal by allowing a secondary dwelling unit on any property zoned R1 or R2 within the city without requiring the lot square footage for 2 dwelling units. ADUs also have the potential to make homeownership more affordable or more reachable by creating a secondary source of income for property owners. In the 2017 growth policy and with the 2020 growth policy outreach, enhancing the downtown area and increasing density through infill have both been identified as key portions and things that the citizens of Livingston would like to see. Additionally, within the 2020 outreach, discouraging sprawl was high on the list of things that were stated in that outreach. The ADU amendment would allow infill density, increasing the amount of housing within the existing city without the need to expand additional infrastructure and without the need to sprawl into adjacent rural areas. It does also decrease the per capita cost of infrastructure within the city when you have more users, more houses on that same amount of infrastructure. In regards to encouraging development around downtown and enhancing downtown, Infill around downtown obviously brings more consumers into that area and makes more downtown slightly more vibrant, especially if that ADU is focused around downtown. It also has the knock-on effect of providing moderately priced housing for employees of local employers. There's been a significant problem in neighboring communities, especially Bozeman, Big Sky, where employers can't find employees because there's no housing for them. We've also seen that in Gardner. So the impacts on the community is the next thing I'm going to talk about. This language was presented to the Zoning Commission in August. At that meeting, they had some significant concerns, both them and the public, about the language that was presented by staff. So basically, we're sent back to examine that language. These issues were generally focused on open space on specific lots, the size of ADUs, vacation rental, and the increased impacts of density caused by the allowance of ADUs. The staff responses to these specific concerns have been included in your packets in the document titled Staff Report Addendum. And it was also provided to the Zoning Commission at their meeting in September. Staff has proposed language to limit impacts on the community, including limiting square footage of ADUs, requiring ADUs be attached to the primary dwelling or to the rear of the primary dwelling to replicate that historic carriage house pattern of development, requiring one off-street parking space, requiring owner occupancy, which was actually removed or recommended to be removed by the Zoning Commission, limiting the maximum number of ADUs to be equivalent to the existing dwelling units on a single property, and requiring the ADUs not be sold separately, as I talked about earlier. Concerns do continue to persist with vacation rentals and impacts on infrastructure, especially the unpaved alleys within the city. Vacation rentals are a complex issue. There's many sides to it, and are probably better explored through their own process rather than through ADUs. We are aware that there are concerns about vacation rentals within the city. It's clear that when you increase density, you increase impacts on infrastructure. There's not really a lot you can do about that, but infill development will generally have a lower impact on infrastructure as it does encourage biking and walking as the city densifies. Finally, I'll just give a brief rundown of the Zoning Commission hearings. So again, there were 2 hearings. One was in August where they asked to continue the hearing for staff to explore some of those concerns, and then one in September. In September, they voted to make 2 changes to the language proposed by staff, which was creating a tiered maximum ADU square footage based on lot size, which was approved 4-1, and to remove the owner occupancy requirement for properties with ADUs, and that was approved 5-0. And then finally, the Zoning Commission voted unanimously 5-0 to recommend approval of the ADU language with the modifications I just talked about to the City Commission, and those modifications have been included in the proposed language that you were given tonight. So I don't know if the City Manager has anything more to say, but if not, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Michael, please add to it.
I think Matthew did a great job. I don't have any additional information to add. Once we are through, the only, I guess I do have one addition. The staff report as it comes before you, I support except for one item because I have some concerns about unequal, I don't know what the term I'm looking for, unequal
Application of the rules.
Yes, unequal application of the rules, I guess, is a great one. The 600 square foot limit for lots under 7,000 feet. While I understand the concern of green space in the lot, that means if you have a 7,000 foot lot with a duplex, you'd be allowed 2 800 square foot ADUs. Whereas if you had 2 3,500 foot lots with a home each, you would only be allowed 2 600 square foot ADUs. And I think that is an unfair application of this particular ordinance. And I get the concerns. I think those concerns are met through the setback requirements, which is the intent of the setbacks. They still have to meet all of those requirements no matter how large they're going to build the primary dwelling, the auxiliary dwelling. So my recommendation as a city manager would be to strike the size differential between lots less than 7,000 square feet and 7,000 square feet and larger. But other than that, I think Matthew did a great job in this, on this report and on the language itself. A complex issue. I think he really made it understandable, but more importantly, enforceable equally across the entire city. It has a great potential to increase density, especially in some of the neighborhoods as we have set up. I think Livingston's well set up to take advantage of this. And so between Matthew and the Zoning Commission, they both did an exceptional job on this, and I recommend it to you with that one change.
Okay, I hate to ask this again, Michael, but can you just give those numbers of your recommendation again, so I can make sure I'm clear on it?
Can you maybe pull it up on the screen share where it is?
It's on page 124, I believe.
So I'm going to give it to you from the staff report. I think it's a little easier to understand there. So this is the portion we're talking about here. And there's I'm using some generalities. There's some specifics to this that would be different if it was a accessory dwelling unit inside an existing home versus a newly built accessory dwelling unit. As the recommendation comes to you, there's basically two sizes of ADUs that are available to property owners. If their property is below 7,000 square feet, they may build a 600 square foot ADU, but if their property is 7,000 square feet or larger, they can build an 800 square foot ADU. So, and I understand the intent was to preserve as much green space in the lots as possible. However, this would actually allow somebody with one 7,000 square foot lot that had a duplex on it to, or two townhomes, to build two 800 square foot ADUs, where a different owner who had two lots that were 3,500 square foot each next to each other, so a same total square footage of 7,000 square feet, and a single home on each, would be restricted to two 600 square foot ADUs. This concept is complex, and I understand. I think it's difficult to get exactly what we want out of it, but I think the setbacks as they exist in the Zoning Commission would address the vast majority of these issues, and I don't think it would be a significant problem to allow 800 square feet on any kind of lot that could fit it.
All right, thank you. I think that's a question that I think people would like to, or that's an issue people would like to have comment on, I'm sure, in the future. That is your only recommendation or change to the document, Michael, is what you're saying?
Yes, I think the document's great. The ordinance is really well written. Again, both Matthew and the Zoning Commission did a great job. I just have concerns about that one issue.
And I question whether we can somehow state that better so that we don't have crammed spaces that end up, you know, having that situation with like a duplex with 1,600 square feet of ADU, and you know, is there not a way to address that within the document and to clarify instead of opening it up? But maybe I'm thinking differently on it. I guess I'd like to hear from others.
Jarrell, can I ask a different question to Matthew, based on what he just said?
Go ahead.
And I want to say, Matthew, thank you for being here. And I know you've been going to a lot of extra meetings, and it's been appreciated by our volunteer commission and boards. So this isn't the first time I'm seeing you, and that's awesome. Thank you. I wanted to ask you about the owner occupied piece. Can you give us some more, like the backstory, I guess? Like, it sounds like you thought that it was a good idea, and then the commission unanimously said no. And I'm hoping you can like shed some light on that so we can understand what that conversation was like without watching all of the video footage.
Yeah, sure. So it was actually more complicated than that. It was not included in the original proposal to the Zoning Commission in August. At that first meeting, we had many members of the public and the zoning commission expressed concerns about ADUs entirely becoming vacation rentals within the city. So that was added by staff between the two meetings to try to assuage some of those concerns. Basically that there would be unsupervised vacation rentals throughout the city of Livingston. When it was brought to the September zoning commission meeting, several members of the commission decided that it wasn't a direction that they wanted to go in, or wasn't the correct manner in which to solve the vacation rental problem, and that the vacation rental should be handled separately, is the short way of putting that. The chair of the zoning commission is also here, and he may be able to add some additional context to that as well, if you would like.
Well, before we switch people, I guess the follow-up question to that is, I know you're new to Livingston, but you're not new to the problems of our region when it comes to housing. And I'm wondering, just for like the folks that are listening and all of us on this call, like, do you, because you're the professional, like you're the one that gets paid to think about this, like every day, all day long. Do you feel like there's a suite of options that we haven't even begun to even tap into regarding vacation rentals? I mean, for a municipality that's not a charter form of government, are there options still coming down the pipe?
Yes, there are always options is the short answer. Vacation rentals are a type of land use. So zoning can regulate vacation rentals to an extent. If we specifically called out vacation rentals in the zoning and either limited them or outright banned them in specific zoning districts, that's certainly a thing we can do. I know, you start talking about vacation rentals and 50% of people come out on one side and 50% of people come out on the other side. So it's a very difficult issue, but there are certainly zoning options you can take that will limit the amount of vacation rentals allowed. And that will be a more equitable way to deal with vacation rentals rather than just burdening ADU builders and owners who are the only ones that have to deal with any sort of vacation rental regulations.
Thanks, that's really helpful. And then that's like the hardest question out of the gate we could ask you at a public meeting, but there you go, got that over with, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, any clarifying questions of Matthew at this time before we open it to public comment?
Jarrell?
Yep, go ahead, Mel.
I see that you have a parking space allotment towards that dwelling. There are many units that are on the alleys that there is not that space for the car. But if you go out to the street, for instance, I live in the Geyser or South Yellowstone area. There's one block where there's two homes, and the two homes don't face Geyser. So that whole curbside going up Geyser going west is available. And there's some people that have two cars, living together, for both individuals, and they park on the street. And it doesn't, I see it as a good example, but that space is not, there's no home there, put it that way. There's no frontage of any home that faces that way. And they've been doing it for years and it hasn't upset anybody. So that's the only thing I see with the parking. They're just, a lot of alley homes are just not that space, so.
Matthew, can you explain just the rationale behind having the parking place?
Sure. It's generally taken from other cities with ADUs around the state. For a dwelling unit currently in the city of Livingston, a standard dwelling unit, you would be required to do 2 parking spaces. Because there's a size limitation on ADUs and they're generally rentals, they usually generate less cars and less trips. With on-street parking, there's nothing banning someone who lives in an ADU or really anyone, as it's public parking, from parking on the street. As it is a relatively general regulation that covers a lot of properties, you have a lot of different blocks. There are certain blocks that have no parking on the street that no one uses, and there's blocks where it's relatively full. So sort of shoot the middle there that works for everything, but doesn't require quite as many parking spaces as your standard dwelling unit, as we generally would think there wouldn't be quite as many vehicles and quite as many trips taken from an ADU.
Right, thank you. Anything else before I open it to public comment? And one last clarifying thing from Michael, I guess, before we open it. This is our first reading. What are can you go through the steps for the public as to where we go with this ordinance, please?
Sure. So it's the standard process that we used with the last ordinance. You'll go through this, make any changes that you desire. Those will be reflected for the public hearing in the next agenda. Then that will be the full public hearing. Everyone will get to make suggestions. You again will make any changes that you need to the ordinance, and then decide whether or not to pass it. And if you pass it, it will become effective 30 days later.
Perfect, thank you. I think that helps a lot. Go ahead and let's open it to public comment.
Hey, Jarrell.
Yes.
Matthew was going to turn it over to the zoning chair when I asked him a follow-up question. So I just want to make sure that we gave Jim time also. Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
Jim, I apologize. I was listening, but moved on. So do you have any other feedback or information you'd like to share at this time, Jim?
Thanks, Madam Chair. This is Jim Berg. I live at 223 South 5th Street in town, and I'm chair of the Zoning Commission. As chair of the Zoning Commission, I would like to just publicly commend Matthew for his work in the planning department. He's been extremely valuable to the Zoning Commission in his work. Helped our efforts a lot. The other thing I would like to mention as chair is that in those discussions that we had at the last meeting, I did oppose both the provision for absentee ownership, ADUs, and short-term rentals, and use of them as short-term rentals. And I'm not sure, Matthew, well, we can certainly check on that. That was my position. But at this point, the city manager informed me I can't really give testimony as chair of the commission, but can speak as a public citizen of Livingston. So I'd like to make the following remarks in that capacity. I live on South 5th Street. In Orr Alley, we've got 5 or 6 alley access units that are there of a variety of types, including one ADU. So I do have some experience with the increase in population in town. I've been there almost 15 years. I guess what I'm mostly concerned about is the pressure, the purchasing pressure on Livingston. I have heard formally that Livingston is one of the top markets in the country for ADUs because of the amount of rents that can be charged and the demand there. And I've been in the construction and business for over 40 years, so I've seen various waves of building boom and bust. And it just feels to me like we are in that process now of really having a lot of pressure, real estate pressure on us. And what my concern is that we really are in danger of losing our sense of community. And I'm saying that on behalf of the people that have lived here for a long time, but also in terms of people who have moved to Livingston because they sense that we do actually have a community here. So I'm making the following remarks in that regard, that there's danger here if we over allow ADUs in town, that we can grow tremendously, we can change residential areas tremendously. When we first started looking at this issue, we looked at what Bozeman had done. I talked to one of their planners over there. They have a pretty restrictive ADU policy over there. 600 square feet is the limited size, 600 square feet plus 1 bedroom. And for that 1 unit, then you can have 1 parking space. When I looked at the proposed ADU ordinance on my lot, which is 7,000 square foot, as it's written now, you could convert a house such as mine into a duplex, and then you could add 2 800 square foot units to it. And each of those 800 square foot units, you know, as a builder back in the 70s, we were building 1,000, 1,100 square foot houses, 3-bedroom houses. So an 800 square foot unit could have 2 bedrooms in it. So then you possibly, if somebody was in the real estate speculation mode, they could build on a 7,000 square foot lot. They could build 2 800 square foot ADUs. You could have 2 couples living in those 2 bedrooms each, but you would only require them to have 2 parking spaces. So 8 people who are commuting to work, only 2 additional parking spaces, and then the rest of those cars would end up on the street. So I'm not saying that's the average impact, I'm just saying that that's the potential in certain areas where there would be quite a bit of disruption. So my recommendation as a citizen and a homeowner is that maybe you take a more conservative, cautious approach and try that for a year or 2, see how it works out. And if the process works well, if it fits into the neighborhood, then we can sort of liberalize what the requirements are in the ordinance. I know Bozeman certainly went through 3 different versions of their ordinance over time. So I think that's probably where I would want to leave it now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. So I will continue to open it to public comment. I don't see anyone's name in the chat, but please do enter it in the chat if you can. It helps us to kind of manage the list and not miss anyone. But also, please go ahead and someone can start.
Hi, Jonathan Hettinger, 519 West Park Street. I wanted to speak about a number of different parts of the ordinance. I think that what Jim said, I agree with what Jim said, and I think that there's a lot to consider there. And I think that as a young person who's trying to rent a place in Livingston, a lot of the rentals are accessory dwelling unit type places, even though they aren't allowed. So I do think it's important to try and get that approved and get them regulated and things like that in order to find and guarantee that people have a legal and safe place to live. So I think that that's really important. And I think that this is a good idea to increase density and encourage more things like this for people to live, especially when we know housing is so hard to find and so expensive for many of the service worker industry type people that live and work in this community. And I also wanted to say that I think it's worthwhile to consider an owner occupancy requirement for one of the units at least, just because I think that it stops it from becoming these investment properties where this is an Airbnb, and I think that the city really just needs to take a look at some of these impacts from Airbnbs. And then I also wanted to just talk about process a little bit. I was a little confused about this process because in March, I remember the commission talked about what the zoning commission should work on next between large format retail or ADUs. And I know that both of those processes have been moving forward, but the large format retail was supposed to be first. And then the other thing that I worry about is the misuse of growth policy data. While I'm generally supportive of this idea, and I think that the growth policy could eventually lean that way, I think without I worry about using the growth policy data from these survey responses to inform this decision, because I think that we're still don't entirely know we don't know how the growth policy is going to shake out. So I worry about without a finalized growth policy, we don't want to just kind of pick and choose what we think that says so far. So I guess that's my comments. I'm generally supportive of the idea, but I think that it's worth looking at owner occupancy, and I worry about many of these just becoming Airbnbs. So thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Anyone else? Please go ahead and state your name and address. Any public comment on ordinance number 2090, sorry. Okay.
Can I comment? I'm not sure if I'm in the right chat. This is Joseph Wellington.
I didn't see you in the chat, Joseph, but go ahead.
I was trying to, I think I just sent a message to Michael privately by accident because I can't figure out how to chat in the public group. I just want to mostly reiterate what Jonathan said. I think this is a good idea. I think Airbnbs are a bigger problem than we've acknowledged in this community. And I think that you should prioritize increasing rentals for affordable rentals for people, and yeah, deprioritize vacation rentals and short-term rentals. That's basically all I have to say.
Thank you, Joseph. Okay, any other public comment at this time? Remember, this is also the first reading. You'll have another opportunity. Okay, I'm going to close it from public comment and open it to commissioners. Any commissioner comments at this time?
Madam Chair, I'd like to speak.
Go ahead.
I just want to, first of all, we're very fortunate to have somebody of Jim Berg's caliber on the zoning commission, and we could do a lot worse. And I agree with Jim's sentiments a lot, and it's a hard thing to digest. I've looked around at, town, and like the 300 block of South 3rd, the street is packed with cars all the time, and whereas other areas they're not. So it's a tough road to hoe, but I am definitely in favor of ADUs, but with what Jonathan said, I do believe I like the owner occupancy side of the thing. It keeps somebody that's invested in the property on the property, and yeah, basically that's all I have right now. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, commissioners, other commissioners?
I think the the
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. The concern about vacation rentals or Airbnbs is a very valid one. I know there have been options in other places to keep that somewhat under control. And I know it's a toss-up between persons being able to control their own property. As an investor, I think anyone strictly as an investor in property for the purpose of a vacation rental is very legitimate, but you also don't want a whole city full. And I think that whatever options are available to more or less keep that under control, such as ownership or the owner being on the property, would be, at least from my perspective, a good start. The point of having affordable rentals would be totally destroyed by having them winding up as vacation rentals or temporary housing for someone who wants to move out of wherever they are, at least temporarily. I believe that should be written in the ordinance someplace, that required ownership on the property. Thank you.
Thank you, Warren. Okay, other commissioners. Go ahead, Melissa.
So the first thing I want to say is, if we're going to be looking at Chapter 30, I would love to see an update to the official zoning map. I know that sounds really boring, but if you look at the official zoning map, the description of it, it's super duper outdated. Like, it's a mayor and it's not the thing that we have online. It's this paper thing that does not reflect our current city boundaries even. And so I know that's just like a really boring thing that doesn't have to do with ADUs. But if we're going to look at Chapter 30, I think this would be a great time to clean that up, because it's like decades outdated. And the official zoning map is referenced in other documents in the code. The other things that are on my mind is I'm generally in favor of ADUs, like that we work on this topic, and I'll come back to that in a minute, but I wanted to first address what other folks were talking about with this owner occupied. We haven't really talked about what that means for a building or a home or residence to be owner occupied. So I think that would be another layer of the conversation if we're going to revisit it, is what does that even mean? Like, is 1 month a year owner occupied and then they're gone the other 11 months? Or is it like a certain period of time? I know different cities across the country who have challenges with vacation rentals require occupancy for a certain amount of the calendar year. So I'm just flagging that. Some other things that stand out to me as concerning are the way that the growth policy, the adopted growth policy, and the potential growth policy are being used to justify ADUs. I'm concerned because our current growth policy, let's see, like our official growth policy is not the exciting new one. It is the one that says, we have relatively stable population and overall housing stock seems to be adequate. So I think we need to be really careful about where we are in the process, because none of this agrees with our current growth policy. Our current growth policy says that we are living in a rosy world where everybody has adequate housing in Livingston. Even though we know that's not true, and that's where we have an update. The update, I think somebody from the public brought it up. Jonathan, we talked about this back before the pandemic. The zoning commission came to us. This is like a wide lens scope issue that I have, is that while I'm in favor of this conversation about accessory dwelling units, I'm super frustrated that the commission actually voted on this. And we have it in the meeting minutes that it was unanimous. It was motion by Maybe, Friedman seconded it, that we work on large format retail first, and the ADU draft is supposed to go back to the zoning commission after the large format retail. And we were all in favor and it passed unanimously. So I'm feeling kind of frustrated right now that large format retail is still hanging out in the air and people have been talking about it for, I don't know, how many of you commissioners have been on the planning board besides me? At least 2 of you, working on large format retail, and it's never been, we don't have any closure on that topic. It's never been finished. So while I'm excited about this, I also recognize that our community wants the large format retail dealt with. And in fact, the growth policy survey it's somewhere in this document, here it is, that justifies us working on, or justifies to the staff working on accessory dwelling units. It also puts that the #1 land use issue is regulating big box stores, which is large format retail or large retail format. So I'm feeling really I guess frustrated that that's still hanging in the balance. The commission voted, we have a record of the commission voting to do that first, and that this is before us, which is kind of a sore spot for me right now. So I'm wondering, I guess, how did we get from where we were in February or March to here, where the document is saying that the planning department was directed to work on ADUs? What was the process for that? Because I, as a commissioner, feel like I must have missed something, because I thought we were all in favor of large format retail first, or large retail format, however we're saying that now.
Michael, could you talk about the history? I know that this issue has been brought to me, and just the timing of the ADUs, why we're where we're at. And I know there's been the question of putting the retail or big box store issue before, or do we do growth policy before that, finish that to help drive the decisions of each of those? Can you help with that history? Because I think she's not the only one wondering.
Sure. So this did come before the commission. It was brought before the commission by the zoning commission, and they asked for what their priorities should be. The commission assigned them the large scale retail, and I think they have been working on that since that assignment. In the meantime, since we acquired Matthew, we had some additional staff capacity. And so not pulling the board away from what the commission assigned them, the staff could work on the next priority, which was ADUs. So we took the advantage of that time to be able to work on the next priority. Matthew just happens to be super efficient, and so he finished the ADU before the zoning commission was able to finish what they wanted to bring forward to the commission on large scale retail. So it wasn't that we're working on one before the other, we were actually working on both simultaneously. We allowed the zoning commission to work on what the city commission assigned them, and then the staff picked up the secondary one and then provided that once it was completed.
So when did Matthew start?
Matthew started the 1st of July.
So he did this all in like a month?
Yep, he's kind of amazing.
Hi, Madam Chair, if I may. We are currently working on large scale retail. It is basically, I have looked through a draft that the zoning commission has provided. It is on the agenda for the zoning commission next week. So it's currently ongoing. It is At this point, substantially more complex than the ADU issue. That may seem slightly backwards, but when you start getting into things like design standards, requirements, potential for additional permitting processes, things like that, it has become very complex and it has become a very time consuming. So it's not that we have put it on the back burner, it's just, it's become very complex and we are currently working on it. This was just a much shorter process.
Thanks for clarifying that. I think,
This is Jim Berg. May I contribute to this?
that's up to Darrell. You're on mute, Darrell.
Madam Chair?
Melissa, it was your question. Would you like Jim to help answer that?
Sure, yeah, that'd be great.
Thank you.
Just to fill you in on the sequence, the zoning commission was working on large format retail. We had some interruption with the COVID problem, but we were working on it. And then we got a request from Matthew to check to see if we could form a quorum to deal with ADUs at a separate date. And while I was in the process of checking with my membership about their availability, the notice for the meeting was published. So at that point, because the meeting was published, our hand was forced and we were, it was on the agenda, and so we had the meeting and proceeded with that. But our intent as the zoning commission was to continue working on the large format retail and finish that.
Thank you, Jim. Melissa,
Yeah, so I guess like in the future, when we're talking about big contentious issues and the commission votes on it, it might be helpful if we were brought up to speed on why things are out of order for us, just so it helps us when the public comes to us, wondering why it looks like things aren't being dealt with in the way the commission wants things dealt with. And I understand it sounds like it's just a timing thing and it was not an intentional thing, other than people intentionally working on topics, which is great. But just because this is such a contentious, housing generally is like a difficult topic for people in our community. So I guess, one thing that's on my mind really is like, we don't have the current growth policy. It sounds like we're just waiting for it. And the planning board hasn't seen it. I'm on the planning board. The commission hasn't seen it. Staff probably has seen drafts of it. So I don't know how this lines up other than what we're being told from the draft documents we've seen or the survey results. And so that's one thing that's on my mind is over and over again, we hear from the community that they don't want us to, they want us to be thoughtful that the growth policy, we're just waiting for it now. And they want to make sure that we're making decisions as their representatives that match what they want. And so I feel like this is something that people probably want, but I don't know that for sure. And so I really wish the growth policy was done, but I know that it's not. So that just leaves me feeling conflicted about this topic generally right now, like uncertain if the details are matching up with what people want.
Thank you, Melissa. Any other commissioners, comments, questions? I do obviously have a few. One of my biggest concerns with this document is, it's very, very detailed in a lot of ways, but it also is a big commitment to what our community can and will look like in the near future. And I do agree with the need and the want of the ADUs, but I also am concerned about design standards, you know, everything that goes along with it, you know, the infill, the parking, the, I think the problems that can come with it as well. And I feel like we really, really want to be very clear in our document as to what ADUs look like and be very comfortable with it. I think it is imperative to have that before we do move forward with approving it in the future. That's my opinion, that we want to be comfortable. And I think the growth policy helps to drive that. Yes, but and I've said this before, that the growth policy is not the end all be all to how we move forward in our community. It is part of how we move forward. But one of my big concerns is, you know, historically, if you just drive around town, you can see when the historical ADUs were just sort of allowed to be built willy-nilly with very few restrictions or requirements, and the problems that we're still dealing with because of that. And I know, you know, with the railroad coming in and then becoming, you know, a long time ago, but then building up and being very, very much a part of our community, they had a lot of growth in a short time, and they needed to house people, workers, families. And you can see where these little homes were popping up in the backyards of other homes and parts of it. And my worry is that we will have that again if we keep it too, you know, too big of ADUs and too small of a lot. Or, you know, I'm even concerned with those numbers as Michael was saying, that you can have an 800 or 600 in a square, less than 7,000 square foot lot, depending on, you know, those numbers, or 7,000 1 foot. You can have 2 600 or 2 800s, right? That's a lot of house and very little space. And I don't know. I think we have to be very, very thoughtful, and we have to be very defined in what we want our community to look like. So I do look forward to continuing this discussion, and I, again, support ADUs. I mean, I don't hardly know a person who hasn't talked about it in their own home. It just seems like part of what people do for family, for, you know, extra rent or extra incomes. Retirees are looking at it. I mean, I think it is a huge value to our community, but we have to be extremely thoughtful. That's all I have to say on it for now, but would love any last thoughts before we have a motion. Anyone else?
Can we discuss before motion the process one more time?
Yes, please. And the timeline, Michael?
Sure. So this is the first reading. Again, any changes you'd like to make tonight, we can make to the ordinance, and they would appear in the second reading. The second reading will be a public hearing. And so the public is obviously welcome, as they were tonight, to come and give any opinions they have on the specifics of the ordinance. If any changes made to the ordinance at that time, if it was passed, then 30 days later, that ordinance would become effective. I do want to point out one thing to you, just because you brought it up and had a concern. Commissioner Newts did mention that the staff has probably seen drafts, and she's absolutely correct. We've gone back and forth on a couple initial drafts, just making sure everything is correct. But we did send an email to Amelia, who's leading the effort of our growth policy, asking about this specific question. And basically, if you can read by my cursor here, so moving forward with introducing ADUs will align. She's talking about Housing issues will likely fall high in terms of overall priority. Zoning language changes tend to be simpler and prime for near-term priorities. So moving forward with introducing ADUs will align. So that was just something that we did as a staff to reach out to make sure that it was actually going to align. And the contractor basically said yes, from all the input they've gotten through the public process and through their drafting process. They believe that an initiative on ADUs will align. The growth policy won't tell you how to do ADUs. They'll just tell you that it's probably a tool that fits with what your overall goals are. And that's what she's indicating here, is that this is probably a tool that fits with our overall goals. So I just wanted to give that to you because Matthew had included it in the packet, and I just wanted to make sure you had seen it.
Thank you very much. Good information. Anything else? So if this goes to a public hearing, what is our timeline for to move it forward? Can we have more time for discussion, for research, or does it have to be within a timely in timeliness, I guess, like some things?
The earliest we can look at it is the first meeting in November. So it'll be 2 meetings from now. So a whole month from now. That'll be the same for all these ordinances because of the zoning ordinances, because of the public notice requirements. It's 15 days, which can't fall in between the 14 days for a meeting. So it automatically spills over to the next meeting. So November is actually the first time we could look at that. And that's actually, we're going to address that a little bit in city manager comments because that's election day and a city holiday. So that meeting may get pushed as well. But that would be the earliest we could look at it.
And when are we going to have access to the growth policy as the planning board and as the general public and the city commission?
Well, you're talking the first draft?
Yes. Yeah.
I think the contractor's working on a couple of changes that Matthew provided them. I would expect to have it by the end of this week, maybe the end of next week, to be able to put out to the planning board for their public process. Matthew, you think that timeline's about right?
Yeah, probably. I haven't provided them to them. I've just provided them to you and Jim. So we're probably looking sometime next week, ideally before the planning board meeting, which I believe is on the 16th of October.
Okay. I would like to propose one request of the zoning commission to the commissioners, and that is that we ask them to look at these additions that Michael added with the square footage and make a recommendation on those as well. Just because I don't know if they had that information previously before Michael's recommendation. I would just like them to have knowledge or time to discuss. And then if that could happen at their next meeting, I don't know. But I would like to have their thoughts on that recommendation. What do you guys think?
I'm in favor of that. I think that's a great suggestion. And the timeline allows for it easily.
Thank you. So zoning commission, Michael, if we could pass that recommendation and those changes that you added to them so they can look at them at their next meeting, that'd be great.
Sure, I'll have Matthew actually update the code, the draft code to reflect those changes and provide that to him.
All right, great, thank you. So then,
one thing, I don't know, I'm trying to remember because there's so much and there's so many drafts in here. So if I missed it, I'm sorry, Matthew. So that's Michael's feedback. I guess if there's like a staff, what's the word I'm looking for? Like if there's a staff also, like the planning department has an opinion on it, I would like that as well. Like if they have a recommendation for one versus the other and why. Just because they have a very planning specific, I think Michael's probably thinking bigger picture and planning thinks about planning. So if Matthew and Jim have a different perspective, or additional information to share, I want that to be available to the zoning commission and to us also as commissioners.
Are you talking planning board or planning staff?
So I was talking zoning commission and planning staff, Matthew and Jim.
Okay.
So we have Michael's opinion as city manager, we have the zoning commission, and then we have the planning department, who all have sort of different scopes, I think. So I think that would be informative.
Okay. So last question before we move it again to the motion. If we make a motion to pass and it passes, and we plan on putting it on in November or so, somewhere around that time for a public hearing, what if we, the commission wanted to delay it? Do we have a required time to address it, Michael? Because sometimes there's things that happen, things get in the way. And I know, like you're saying, I don't want us to be in a timeline crunch that we've been in before. Is there any timeline crunch or issues that would relate to this if it moved to, say, further down into December or something for some reason?
So once we notice the public hearing for the first meeting in November, you're required to hold it in the first meeting in November. But if for some reason you didn't want, if you couldn't finish it, you could continue it to your next regular meeting. I don't know if you can go beyond that, but you can certainly could continue it at least one meeting.
Is there a timeline? So yeah, I guess my question's before that timeline. If we pass the ordinance tonight to move it to public hearing, is there a time requirement of weeks, months to move it to the public hearing? Or do we have some flexibility from a month to 2 months, 3 months? Is there a restriction?
You don't have a restriction as far as time goes. You just can't change it in between. So whatever ordinance, if you pass it this evening, that's the ordinance that, unless you, whatever you change in it, that ordinance is what will show up in the public hearing. So you can have more time in between, but you can't make edits to the ordinance in between, if that makes sense.
Okay. So we have to take this as is and it goes to public hearing.
As is, as you pass it tonight. So any changes you make tonight, that's what would go forward to the public hearing.
And then the public hearing has no place for changes.
Yeah, while this, whatever you pass, if you pass tonight, that would go to the public hearing, but you have the ability to change anything during that reading as well. So
Right.
you can make changes during that public hearing, and then whatever you pass that night would be the final ordinance.
Well, I didn't think so, but it made, the way it sounded, I thought that sounds very exact. Okay. All right, everyone okay with the timelines? Okay. Do we have a motion from the commission on ordinance number 2090?
Can I get a clarifying question really quick, Ann?
Sure.
So Darrell, it sounds like what you want to do potentially is, if our timeline is not restricted, have these specific questions go to the zoning commission and then come back to the commission by the first public hearing, so that if we want to edit this ordinance at a public hearing, we can do so.
Yes, and I think that the public and the city and the commission can all edit at that time based on more information and more direction from the zoning commission as well as the city. So going back, do we have a motion from the commission on ordinance number 2090?
Commissioner Schwartz, I will make a motion to approve Ordinance 2090. Or
Second.
resolution.
Second.
I think it was for Commissioner Schwartz and second by maybe. I don't
Yeah.
know. I heard both.
I think it was Mel.
Okay, at Friedman. I heard both of you.
Yeah.
We have a motion by Schwartz and a second by Friedman. Roll call, please.
Chair Hoagland,
Yes.
Commissioner Schwartz,
4.
Commissioner Friedman,
4.
Commissioner Maybe,
Or
Commissioner News.
Or,
Motion passes. Next on our agenda, we have ordinance number 2091, an ordinance of the City Commission of the City of Livingston, Montana, amending Article 1, Article 2, and Article 3, and Article 4. Article 5, Article 6, and Article 7, Chapter 30 of the Livingston Municipal Code entitled Zoning. Mr. Cardus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this ordinance change came out of basically just during the reviews for these other zoning changes. We just wanted to clean up some of the code. Let me share with you where we're looking. So one of the things it does is we had defined personal care centers, but we did not include assisted living facilities and nursing homes in that definition. And so it excluded them from some highway commercial areas that probably were suitable for assisted living facilities or nursing homes. So we cleared that up to include those in the code. And then that is reflected in the table. We also cleared up some language. We went from single family dwellings to one family, duplexes to 2 family dwellings, and added townhouses as a separate category. And then we took out nursing homes, edited personal care centers, and then did some definition cleanup. So basically it better defined our use of assisted care centers, especially for adults in highway commercial zoning. While there's not a huge need for that, it could be occasionally repurposed. If you look at like the Parkway Apartments, that was originally a motel that has been converted into apartments. That could also have been converted into senior assisted living, which is easier for access for people downtown. It's closer to resources, grocery stores. So we thought that was an appropriate use in the highway commercial zoning. And that is the only significant changes in this ordinance.
All right. Let's open it to public comment. Or is there any clarifying questions before we open it to public comment? Okay. Any public comment on ordinance number 2091? No public comment? Okay, I'm not used to that. Do we have any commissioner comments or questions on ordinance number 2091?
yeah, I have 2 questions.
Go ahead, Melissa.
So, or 3, maybe 3 questions. We'll see. We can count as we go along. Did this go to the zoning commission?
All zoning changes, both text and map amendments must go to the zoning commission. As is included in the last paragraph of the staff report, they voted unanimously to recommend approval.
Thank you, Matthew. And then my next question is, I can't exactly tell which section this map is under. This official zoning map business.
I can quickly address the official zoning map if you would like.
Yes, please.
It is out of date. Technically, it is not the official zoning map, but it's just an illustration. If you look at city ordinances, there is a whole big chunk of code on what is required for the official city zoning map, including a signature block from the chair of the commission. I am aware that that illustration is an issue. I have talked to the city attorney about it. It's something that I'm looking into, but it is significantly more complex than I would like to be, is the short answer. We're gonna have to pull a bunch of old, basically zone map ordinances to make sure we produce one that is accurate. So I'm currently trying to work on it, but it's not easy, is the short answer there.
The happy answer is that you're aware that because there's language in here that's problematic too. When we used to have a mayor form of government, we don't anymore. So thank you. It's enough for me right now to know that you're working on it. And if you could pass along your updates as you learn, it would be super satisfying to those of us who are stuck loathing things like that. You know, the other question I had, commissioners, is the last time this table came up, it was really talking about compatible land use. It was something that the planning board had brought up quite some time ago, and recommended that this table and the topic of compatible land use, I don't know if this is ringing any bells for you, get kicked over to the zoning commission. And it was after the Paradise Ridge subdivision conversations. It was just something that surfaced in the planning board conversation. So I think it sounds like those things were not addressed on this go through by the zoning commission. And that could be a good topic to kick back to the zoning commission, because it was specifically questions and concerns about highway commercial. Do y'all remember this? So this idea of like highway commercial basically having just a giant subdivision. So it's not really the intent of highway commercial to be 95% housing.
Right.
So it sounds like Matthew's very involved in these spaces now. So if like the planning or zoning or whoever got back up, the timing could be right to figure out how do we address that issue if we're making these other updates. Because that was a hole that also hasn't been closed yet. And I don't know if it would fit in here or if it needs to fit somewhere else, or if it's here, fits here and somewhere else. That would be probably a question for Matthew.
My request on that, as that's a relatively substantial change to what's allowed in the zoning district and does change people's entitlements, would be to address that through a different text amendment. And it's certainly something that we can look at with the zoning commission and discuss if they want to, from what I'm hearing, update potential uses. So either add things to the list or remove them, and examine the uses allowed in each zoning district to make sure that they are compatible with what the city is intending. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I think, Matthew, the other thing was like, if somebody, for example, this is a really specific example that raised a concern that it wasn't the time or place to dive into that concern because we were doing a subdivision review, but it was a highway commercial zoning. So there are many allowed uses. So really what was brought before the commission and the planning board was a residential subdivision with an RV park. So it was primarily residential, even though it was highway commercial. So there was this like question about, is this what we mean when we say highway commercial, that it can be a residential neighborhood? Or do we mean we want to restrict residential neighborhoods and only allow a certain percentage of land use to go to whatever? So I don't know, because we didn't dive into those conversations, but there was some interest in having those conversations. Does that help?
Yeah, that's helpful. And we can certainly discuss with the zoning commission about how they want to look at that.
Thanks, Melissa. Thanks, Matthew. Any other questions or comments? Melissa, you had 3. I feel like you didn't cover one of them.
That was really nice of you, Darrell, that you were listening to me. Thank you for that. And I think I feel comfortable with all the information I have. So I don't have any more right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other commissioners on these, the cleanup of these articles and within our zoning?
Not for me.
This is so, just one little point. I have to say that the document that I had, Michael, was so small that I could hardly read it, and I don't usually need reading glasses. So I don't know what happened on my printout, but it was very difficult to read. So in the future, I don't know, it seems like the past, or the 200 pages we've been talking about were very small in the document. Matthew might have some idea why, but just an FYI for the future. It was very hard for me to sort of look through unless I went back to the screen and then enlarged it a bit.
Take a look at it. I think it was just printed out in markup view, which took some of the margin.
Yeah, it was about 2/3 of normal.
I have one other thing that's small, but I just have to say it or I won't be able to sleep. I'm sorry. Well, I'm not sorry, really. So I'm going to say it. Is that okay, Jarrell?
Go ahead.
I think we should be thoughtful about gendered language in our city documents as we talk about, and we're going to be talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So this isn't the first time. I don't call it out every time I see it, but maybe I should start. At the bottom of page 80, it does say the city building inspector of the city of Livingston or his designated representative. While I am aware that most city building inspectors might be male, I think that it could easily be switched to the designated representative and be more inclusive. And I think that it's little things like that that matter to our shared documents, just as something to point out, to watch for that kind of language in our city documents.
May I quickly? I believe you will see an update hopefully next month that I believe, and I don't have it in front of me, changes that language to and their representative. So it is something I am also aware of.
Thank you, Matthew.
I just gave you the clap hands in the Zoom. Thanks, Matthew. Been waiting for a reason to use those in a meeting.
There they are. Yeah, very important. And I'm glad you caught that as well, Melissa. Okay, are we ready? Any other last thoughts? Do we have a motion from the commission on ordinance number 2091?
I make a motion, we pass ordinance 2091.
Second.
We have a motion by Friedman and a second by Maybe. Roll call, please.
Chair Hoagland,
Yes?
Commissioner Schwartz,
Or
Commissioner Friedman,
4.
Commissioner Maybe,
Or
Commissioner Newts.
4.
Motion passes. We do need to make a motion to extend the meeting. Does someone?
so moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Schwartz and a second by Newts to extend the meeting. Roll call, please.
Chair Hoagland,
Yes.
Commissioner Schwartz,
Or
Commissioner Friedman,
4.
Commissioner Maybe,
or
Commissioner Newts.
4.
Motion passes. Next on our agenda is resolution number 4924, a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Livingston, Montana, authorizing the city manager to sign a 2-year services agreement with Auzmor Incorporated to provide city employees with an e-learning services platform. Mr. Cardews.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before we go on, would you like another 5-minute break? We've went another hour and a half.
Yeah, that's a good call.
It's up to you guys.
It's been requested once by Mel, and I think that we should honor his request
It's
and
requested.
not make him ask at every meeting.
All right.
get my thumb. I'm up.
or
Okay, 5 minutes. Timers appreciated.
Yeah. Where are you? Oh. Okay, I'm there now. Okay. I don't know. This is Relly's computer, so I don't know. Hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I don't. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm not aware that I'm doing anything, but that's another point altogether. Okay. Okay. Appreciate it. Okay, have a good one. Talk, see you a little bit.
All right, we're ready. Okay, we're moving on to our resolution. Michael, could you address our e-learning platform and anyone else?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is a initiative that came out of the fact that COVID has changed a lot of the ways that we can train. Additionally, training inside the city is usually difficult because we have so many 24-hour workers or critical workers. You can't just shut down the wastewater treatment plant to run a training. So even if we bring in speakers or outside trainers, it's difficult to get everyone in the city to train at the same time. So I turned that problem over to Lisa, and she's going to give you a presentation on what she came up with.
Thanks, Mike. Just, ooh. Are you gonna mute? Thank you. We're echoing because I'm in Courtney's office. So Mike had turned over this process to me to look at how we do training. And, and as he mentioned, one of the biggest problems we have is a variety of shifts, 24/7. You can't take down wastewater. You can't take down 911, the police, fire. All of these things have to run 24/7, 365. So getting everyone together to do consistent training is next to impossible. We have certainly sent people out for training. We have brought trainers in the past, and we've gotten good coverage across the organization for staff, but not the kind of coverage that we really want to have that guarantees really consistent training, especially in core areas like anti-discrimination, anti-bias, sexual harassment, ethics, general compliance, along with other topics that are really key and important to us, such as site safety, especially for our public works folks, and looking at some of the more nuanced things where we want to do training like leadership development, especially as we look at the succession planning that we're going to have to do as an organization across the board over the next 5 years as we start to see some of our more tenured staff retire. So finding a one-size-fits-all solution is really difficult because of the variety of content we require, as well as the fact, like I said, that we can't take a department down to do training. Add to that COVID-19 and the limitations that puts on group size, settings where you can conduct training, travel limitations and travel restrictions where we would potentially look to bring someone in from the outside. So all those things just really create a tier of barriers for us in terms of how we get good training to our staff. Some of the other things that we have struggled with is being able to demonstrate consistent compliance with training. When we have, HR complaints or things that go through the HRB, these are areas where being able to just hand a report over would be very helpful and save a ton of time for our staff. So we really began to look at a solution that could kind of do all of these things. As part of that, obviously an e-learning platform becomes the answer and becomes the most cost-effective solution, as well as addresses those issues of timing, variety of content, and reporting capability. So as part of this process, I looked at, I've mentioned some of them in a little handout here: Biz Library, Auzmor, eLumi, Absorb LMS, Moodle, Blackboard, Mindflash, 360 Learning, Tavuti, Inquisique, and some other systems as to what would be a good fit for us, both looking at a need for content variety, everything from that trench safety video and how to safely operate a backhoe, to how to become a first-time supervisor, to how to step up to executive management, and then also include all of the items around compliance, anti-harassment, anti-bias, and ethics training that we would need. After going through all of these vendor demos, and meeting with all of them, my recommendation to the city manager was that we go with Auzmor. They provided the most content and flexibility at the best price point for the city. They are committed to this 2-year contract with implementation and ongoing support, all included in that one price. They have a very robust partner called Open Sesame, which creates content and delivers it to the platform, the Auzmor platform, so that we would be able to access all of these. It's a video-based learning, short clips. You can assign them either as a series or one by one if you're doing some building type learning on a certain content within each operational area. It already had COVID-19 information that is being updated continually with what best practices are. It is a very easy end user platform. It looks something like Netflix. So to the employee, they will log in. Everyone will get their own individual login. They'll have their assigned core content. They'll click on whatever the video or quiz or whatever the learning mode is for that particular topic. And then there is, competency assessment at the end where they're either taking a quiz or drafting a statement of what they learned from it. There's a bunch of varieties of things that they do to test the learning and comprehension of the concept. And then all of that then gets reported back to department heads for compliance with training and making sure that our employees are getting the same core content that we want across the organization in all of these different variety of learning areas. The reporting is very robust and easy to use for any of the department heads, managers, or supervisors that'll have access to reporting. The cost for a 2-year commitment is $18,000, so it's $9,000 per year. That is a set cost for the 2 years. We would expect as we continue with the platform after that, there may be some small increases to it based on what we look at. For that $18,000 over 2 years, we get to assign 100 courses per quarter to employees. Now, obviously, we're not going to overwhelm an employee with 100 courses right out of the gate. I don't really think that would be well received. Wouldn't encourage participation in the program. So we'll ease into it. But with all of those things in mind, this particular platform really became a standout for me in terms of what I needed as an HR director to demonstrate our competencies and to demonstrate our compliance within those competencies, and also create a training platform that can be used so we have consistent onboarding of new employees. We can create an online electronic performance evaluation system so that we can roll out that whole process of performance assessment and development planning to employees on this electronic platform and track compliance, see where things are getting done, see where things are getting missed. If there's a problem, if someone's like, wow, I just didn't understand that, there's additional content that you can assign to gain further understanding. And it's a great way to start beginning to have those development conversations between staff and leadership team members, managers, supervisors, foremen, our sergeants, our captains, all of those folks that are charged with developing the folks as they come up through the ranks within our organization. So with that, any questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
I'll ask first. Are there trainings that are also live, maybe more WebEx like, or Zoom meeting or Zoom trainings that then you have a second part that maybe has the testing?
Yes, it is completely supported and integrated with the Zoom platform, which was another advantage for us, seeing how we were already on the Zoom platform. So it does have the capability to do live-ish training through Zoom or through that platform, and then do follow-up learning afterwards.
Well, just as an educator, some learners need to have multiple types of learning, you know, of their instruction, so that they can maybe see something visual, see someone exampling, and having maybe a slideshow based, question answer section, something like that. But it does help to have the diversity in the instruction.
It does, and this platform has many different, there isn't just one video for sexual harassment. There's 15 to 20, and they'll have a different mode of learning in each. And again, you have the option of live.
So another question, how much are we spending per year on our trainings in a normal year, live with our live trainers, with our trainers coming in?
It's going to be roughly comparable to this. This year is probably not the best one to use because of everything that's happened around COVID. In past years, training budgets across the organization have been somewhere between 12 to 15,000, depending on the cycle of recertifications that we need to do for some of our folks that carry certifications. So all in all, it'll be comparable, but it'll also provide consistency across the organization in terms of content.
Plus, you can pick and choose what's better for a particular team.
Yes, and even a particular individual, because someone within that team, as you said, may not learn by watching a video, and someone may, you know, watch a video and get it right out of the gate. So this does allow that customization.
Right, that's all I have. Thank you, Lisa, for that clarification. Any other questions from the commissioners?
Yeah, this is Melissa. Lisa, you said something. You said that one size fits all is probably difficult. I feel like it's probably impossible.
Yes.
So, or it certainly is impossible. I think that is this the first time you're considering like e-learning for the city of Livingston people for training?
To this scale, yes. There are, you know, there are some packages through OSHA and DOT that we've used for safety training. We have safety training programs that have come out of MMIA through both our workers' comp and our liability carriers. So we have used some of those e-learning models there. It's still kind of tough if you've got someone out on vacation that day, they missed that training, or if they're out sick. This allows you to assign training, give a window of completion of, like, call it 30 days or even 45 days, and then folks have the option of still getting that training. If they're not in the office that day, they can do it the next day when they get back in. It's just I think a more efficient way to deliver that training and meet the needs of the organization and the staff.
It's certainly contemporary also.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like it's keeping up with the times. I'll be curious, you know, assuming this, hypothetically, if this passes, I'll be curious to hear how it goes tracking the topics for you. Because like you said, like operating a backhoe and like sexual harassment training, like the way that those types of topics would be tracked to see if the training is effective would likely be completely different. And so, you know what I'm saying? Like, to see, is this training effective? Are we getting what we need from it as an organization? Are our documents still gendered, or are we being inclusive with our, you know what I mean? Like, whatever it is, however you track the things. I'll be really curious, because I think especially like the diversity, inclusion, equity topic, there's so much, it's a hot topic, and many people that are deep in that topic believe there's better or worse ways to deliver the information. But again, one size fits all is impossible. So I'll be really interested to hear how, you know, your feedback as the HR person who's tracking all of the things. I'll be really interested in hearing updates from you on how it's working, or if the city needs to flex in a certain area and try something different as time goes on.
And we'll be including questions after we've rolled this out to survey the employees on how useful they find it, what's the most useful course for them, what could we do differently, what could we do better, how would that work? So it will become part of the employee satisfaction survey process that we do annually.
And just to be inclusive for the commission, I think that there are certain topics that would be appropriate for us if we want to understand what you're doing. Like, there's no reason that we shouldn't be doing the sexual harassment or diversity, inclusion, equity, to see, like, to be on the same page, right? Speaking the same language.
Oh, I have plans for you guys. It's okay.
Awesome. I'm super excited about the backhoe.
I bet that'll be one of your favorites, I'm sure.
Yeah. No, I'm not excited about the backhoe.
Probably not.
Maybe like a little one, maybe.
Maybe.
Need some egress windows. So
excellent.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions from commissioners?
Yeah, hi, Lisa.
Hi, Warren. How are you?
Good. I'm curious about any information about the company, like possibly who they used as references and how long they've been in existence. I appreciate that.
Yeah, sure. They have been around for over 15 years now doing this type of work. And I can send you their profile out. There's a number of awards that they've used for one for ease of use, content variety, and the things that we were really needing in a platform for us. So I know our rep that I've been working with, Z, is fantastic. She has been with them for about 6 years now, and she'll be with us from start to finish. So I'm really, really excited about working with them. But I'll send you out there's a little short introductory video, like a 1-minute that's out on YouTube that you can get from them. So I'll send you guys links to that. So you have them.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
No, I appreciate that.
Thank you, Warren. Do we have any public comment on resolution? I lost the number. Anyone?
4924.
Thank you. 4924. Any public comment? Okay. Then we will move on to a motion. Do I have a motion from the commission on resolution 4924?
I make a motion, we pass resolution 4924.
Second.
We have a motion by Friedman and a second by Maybe. Roll call, please.
Chair Hoagland,
Yes.
Commissioner Schwartz,
4,
Commissioner Friedman,
4.
Commissioner Maybe,
4.
Commissioner Newts.
4.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lisa.
We're waiting with bated breath to see what you have for us.
I'll see if I can assign some fun ones too.
But not 100.
No. So we're moving on to our last resolution. Resolution number 4925, a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Livingston, Montana, amending the budget for the fiscal year 2019-2020 by making appropriations adjustments in the amount of $2,407,206 and revenue adjustments in the amount of $1,073,697. Mr. Cardus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we did a resolution of intent on this one. I think it should have appeared in the public hearings, but we'll go ahead and run this as a public hearing if you don't mind. But I will have Paige go ahead and present the information to you and then allow you to ask any questions.
Thank you, Paige.
Yeah, I guess no changes from the last time. The majority of these budget amendments are actually for depreciation expense, which is a non-cash item. It's just a different basis of accounting than most of the government funds are required to account for. The other large item that you see on there is for the downtown TIF, and that was just completing phase 3 and 4 last summer. When the commission approves the bonding of that, technically they're approving any expenditures associated with that. But I think it's just a good reminder to look at that stuff since they weren't a part of the original budget and have those records in the minutes.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I wondered why this looks so familiar and that it should be in a public, in our public hearing. So we will open the public hearing. This public hearing is now open on resolution number 4925. Do we have any public comment on resolution 4925? And it should be an ordinance, Michael?
No, if it's actually just a resolution because it's a budget resolution.
All right. Is that me making noise? I apologize. I think something's beeping if it's me. Any public comment on resolution number 4925? All right. This public hearing is now closed. Commissioners, any questions or comments on our resolution? Okay, do we have a motion from the commission on resolution 4925?
I move we approve resolution 4925.
I'll
Second,
second. I beat you, Mel.
I was tied.
We have a motion by Maybe and a second by Schwartz. Roll call, please.
Chair Hoagland,
Yes.
Commissioner Schwartz,
Or
Commissioner Friedman, or Commissioner Maybe,
Or,
Commissioner Newts.
Or,
Motion passes. One action item tonight to discuss, approve, deny North Town Subdivision Phases 2 and 3 final plat and plat approval. Mr. Cardus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we'll just do a quick review of the process and what this actually is versus what it's not. And then I'll show you some of the stuff where it's at, kind of give you some background, and you can ask any questions that you may have. So Northtown obviously has come before you multiple times already. Most of those times were for requests for zoning changes. But if you remember back to the original time it came before you, it was for the initial plat. And basically we approved the conditions of all the different phases of it, and we set requirements for each of those phases. So when it comes before you tonight for final plat for phases 2 and 3, what that means is they have completed the requirements that the city gave them. They brought those to city staff signed off on them, and now we're bringing it to you just to notify you that they've met all the requirements we set. The only additional item for this particular for this particular final plat is that they have asked for, and the staff is recommending that we accept a letter of credit for, I believe it's for streetlights, which have not been installed yet. So basically, they agree, they have put money aside to complete that project. We said, yes, that meets the requirements as our intent, so you may continue on with the construction phase. Let me share the screen with you really quick for anyone that's not familiar. Unfortunately, the satellite view has not been updated lately, but this area was the first phase of Discovery Vista. I think there's 16 lots in there. Most of those have been built on.
Northtown.
I'm sorry, Northtown, thank you. Most of those have been built on, and this is kind of a drainage area, and now they're building in this area, which you can see in the packet if you'd like to look at some of the phases on pages, what are they, 270 and 271. In fact, let's see how good the Google car is. No, it doesn't look like it's updated lately. So this is the first phase of Discovery, or I'm sorry, of Northtown that is already under construction. Most of that is already built. One of the major construction items that they were required to do for this phase was to actually improve Prairie Trail, Scenic Trail. This is now completely curb and gutter, sidewalks, and paved. It's newly finished. It looks really nice. If you haven't had a chance to go look at it, I would recommend it. And then kind of in the area where this car is to the north is where the next phase is. That'd be phase 2 and 3, both. So that kind of gives you an overview of where that is. Let me see if I can scooch over here. Let me make sure I'm sharing the correct thing with you. And I wanted to get to those pages where you can see the layouts. There you go. So you can see this area was phase 1. That's right along Prairie Drive. And now Scenic Trail is the one they just improved. And this is phase 2, and this is phase 3. So they met the list of requirements for both of these phases, minus the streetlights, which we have a letter of credit for. And Public Works is working through the developer with a few items on a punch list that have been identified that they know they need to complete. And so we're working through that process. However, they have substantially met all the requirements that we set for them. So we bring this final plat approval before you this evening for your approval.
All right. Are there any clarifying questions from the commission? I'd also like to open it to public comment right away if possible, if there aren't any clarifying questions.
I have a
Melissa?
question. Yeah, can you pull up that map again, Michael? So this happened a couple months before I was a commissioner. So I was not a part of the preliminary or the first round of approval. And so I had a question for you about that map.
Okay.
So
Sorry,
you
this-
showed the one from the agenda that shows the phases.
Okay, hold on just a second.
Yep, that one. Thank you. So on the left side, that's the first phase, and then here we see phase 2 and 3. Can you tell me the slightly darker gray area where your cursor is? Okay, so subject to further subdivision review. So all of that area will still have to go through the whole process of going before the planning board and the commission, right?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yep.
I just wanted to preemptively ask that question to make sure that I understood what you guys have talked about before I showed up on the scene, and thank you.
Yeah, the initial approval for this development was just phases 1 through 3.
Okay.
So any future phases will have to come back through the entire process again.
That
Right.
was my only clarifying question, Darrell.
Thank you, Melissa. Let's open it to public comment first. Any public comment on action item A? Any public comment? Okay. There's no public comment, but commissioners, do you have any questions or comments?
This is Commissioner Friedman.
Go ahead, Mel.
It's quite a sight when they get up there with the road finished and walkways and so forth. And it just brings to mind that all the new construction up there and people moving in behooves us to really find a way to get those people out of there in good shape. So I know it'll be on our agenda very shortly, but it's going to add a lot of people up there, and we got to get them off of there and get them going in a good shape. So, but it is quite beautiful to see all that roadway finished and sidewalks, and people were walking with their dogs and so forth. So it looks very nice.
Thank you, Mel. I do have a question. I guess I will ask, can you revisit how the parkland dedication was addressed in this project with Northtown?
So for this particular development, you can see these light gray phases. That is all open space. So they met the requirement.
Share.
Oh, sorry, I wasn't sharing. Hold on. It's probably much easier to see if I share it.
Yes, it is.
So phase 2 and phase 3 are the ones we're talking about. Phase 1 was the initial one. All of this slashed gray area is open space that they dedicated for their development. So that met all of the open space requirements. Did they?
Sorry, Michael.
Yeah, so all the open space in this area was dedicated to the public. So they met their requirements through these areas.
And were there any trails in that as well?
There aren't any trails in the current phases other than the sidewalk itself, but there was talk that when they came back for future phases, that we would look for connectivity to the Bitterroot Trail in this area.
I know that the developer, Bill, has talked about supporting trails and open spaces, and that he has done a lot of that in his Bozeman projects. Hope to see that continue. Any other commissioner comments?
I think Mel summed it up for me. the thought that needs to be addressed. So, thanks, Mel.
Yes, I agree. All right, we'll move it to a motion. Do we have a motion from the commission on action item A to approve the plat phase 2 and 3 of Northtown?
I'll make a motion to approve action item A.
Second.
We have a motion by Schwartz and a second by Friedman. Roll call, please.
Chair Hoagland.
Yes.
Commissioner Schwartz.
4.
Commissioner Friedman.
4.
Commissioner Maybe.
Or
Commissioner Nunes.
4.
Motion passes. Next, we have city manager comments.
I will keep it short this evening, just a couple of things. I did receive a text from Shari who presented to us earlier this evening. She did want to make one correction to her presentation. While she said originally that it was a $40,000 contribution by the city of Bozeman, she corrected that to say they actually contributed $25,000 to their services. So thank you, Shari, for sending that correction to us. It's always hard to remember numbers on the fly. Other than that, the only other issue I have for you to think about is the first meeting in November. Obviously, Election Day falls on our meeting, which traditionally we have done, except this year is a federal election, so it is a city holiday. So I would probably recommend moving that either to the Thursday or maybe the following Tuesday, however you would like to do that as a commission. You can address that in our next meeting, but I just wanted to put it out there for you to start thinking about and to look at your calendars and schedules.
Thank you. And I have twins that were born on election day, so I wasn't going to be there anyway, so I appreciate it. So we'll address it at the next meeting and decide how we want to schedule. All right. Melissa, moving on to commissioner comments.
The first thing I'll say about the meeting date is I'm guessing if the planning board has the growth policy at that time, my schedule is going to be suddenly very full, very quickly, with lots of extra planning board meetings. So I'm going to give that caveat before we even have the conversation about where we're going to move the meetings. Okay, so the first thing is I want to make sure we pick up the warming center topic now that we've had the presentation, and don't let that slide in terms of if we want to support those community efforts financially. Do we need to put that on an agenda? Do we need a motion? Or what are your thoughts?
Two commissioners to request to put it on. It'd be under an action item, right, Michael?
Yes, it would be if you're talking about like funding issues.
Yeah, and like the timeline, do you have a sense, Michael, of the timeline of, because I know this was in conjunction with a whole bunch of other things we talked about, the budget.
It depends on how you want to go about it. We may want to reach out to Shari and have her, and I can sit down with her, have a Zoom meeting with her, and see if she has a coalition built where she's if she's how the rest of the community is looking at support. So maybe we could reach out to some of our other partners first, see what level of support is already out there and where we can fill in the gaps, or what's in the realm of the possible right now. Or we can lead the way and say, set aside an amount that you wish, and then they can go try and recruit based off of that. It just depends on how you would like to go about it.
Okay, well, I will, I always think that partnerships are the way to go personally. Like the more we can partner with other community members, the stronger of a community we are. I suspect based on the housing coalition meetings, the Park County Housing Coalition meetings that I've been attending, that Shari already has some ideas maybe of who's going to help. So I'm going to make a motion that we put it on an upcoming agenda, and with that caveat that it might need a meeting. It might not be the next meeting right away, but it might be a little time for Michael to have some conversations with Shari.
And
I'll second.
I'll second too. I'll third.
I'm sorry.
We will want some options at that meeting as far as how we look at funding it? Is it through those different options you just laid out, Michael? All right. Anything else, Melissa?
Yes. The next thing I want to do is I do want to thank Matthew Menard specifically. He has been coming to the planning meetings and the zoning meetings, and he's been going to the Park County Housing Coalition meetings since he started. And it's no small amount of extra meetings, obviously, that he's undertaking to help, just to help. And that, because I guess like I'm really recognizing, or I really recognize all of these spaces. We're just talking constantly about how we're in a housing crisis. And I know that ADUs or Northtown or any of the things, like Lisa said, there's no one size fits all. And the same is true for housing. I just want to acknowledge that these topics are really difficult. And I think that we're doing the best we can with the information we have for Livingston. And I really want to extend thanks to Matthew for showing up to all the extra things when he already is certainly putting in the hours during the day. The next thing I want to address is it looks like we got an email from Michael about the air quality monitoring station, that he has some new information. What the DEQ suggested to him is pretty different than what we talked about when we were talking at the budget meeting. It's like, like $49,000 difference in what we were talking about. I think it could be useful if we talked about that at a meeting, an upcoming meeting, the best plan of action. I have some other ideas. I really think that we should be including the health department, the city county health department in this conversation, because it's pretty drastically different than what we talked about, the DEQ monitor versus these purple air sensors. And also I would like to work with the Park County Health Department, the city county health department, to talk about locations, because nowhere, we haven't talked about the schools yet, and the schools are like the place where the kids are. The schools are the community centers, really. I'd like to see that, I think, as an action item. I'd like to see that as an action item so we can discuss it and figure out what else we might consider, since it's such a different concept. Do I need to make a motion for that? I'll make a motion. We revisit the air quality monitoring topic since we have new information.
All right, I will second. Put it on an agenda when time allows.
And I would like for the city county health department, like public health officer, whoever needs to be involved, to be a part of that dialogue. So if they're able to come to a meeting, that would be an efficient use of our time, I think. Is that possible to coordinate that? Is that Michael will help with that?
Michael, could you help with that? See how we can team with the county on.
If their representative could come to the meeting so we could discuss paths forward that work from their perspective as well.
I've already sent them a couple emails, but they've had some turnover there, so I'll just re-engage.
Thank you, that'd be great. It'd be a good efficient use of time to just do it as an action item if she can come. Okay, the next thing.
Melissa, can just, so speaking
If
of
if I can jump in, I have a meeting at 5:30 next Tuesday with the Board of Health. I'll bring that up.
Okay. Thank you. Melissa, just an FYI that the middle school received a bunch of air monitoring devices from the DEQ to do some data collection, and be kind of fun if we somehow involved the kids in this.
Yes, it would. I think that there's a lot of interesting ways to look at air quality, and none of them we are looking at right now. So and the more we collaborate, I think early on, the better the outcome for everyone that lives here, because like we don't get to choose the air that we breathe. That's like one thing we can't like choose not to breathe. So it makes sense to really make this collaborative and make good choices early on, since we have limited funds and limited possibilities now with the DEQ changing what they're willing to help with. Okay, so my last one is kind of a question. I see our list of holidays here, our upcoming holidays and meetings, the calendar of events. So I'm real curious about October 12th is Columbus Day. And so is that do we consider that a city holiday or a state holiday? I think you're on mute, Michael. That question was for you. Sorry.
Oh, it's a federal holiday.
It's a federal holiday, but then some communities changed the name of that to Indigenous Peoples Day. And I feel like that would be super appropriate given where we live and who lives in our community and whose, you know, traditional lands literally we are on right now. I would love to see Livingston call Columbus Day Indigenous Peoples Day. And I'd like to know how we could initiate that as a commission. What's the process for that?
Mike, okay to go, Chair?
Yes, Michael, I'm sorry. I was just waiting for you to answer. I apologize.
Well, obviously we can't change the name of the federal holiday. It will always be Columbus Day until the federal government changes it. If we want to call it something else locally, I'd have to research what other municipalities have done, but I assume it's just a proclamation. Just like we have a proclamation for Arbor Day and a proclamation for Public Works Appreciation Day and a proclamation for Dispatch Week and all the other things. It would really just be, it wouldn't be binding legislation and it wouldn't be policy, but it would be a statement by the commission that this is what we proclaim to be celebrating.
I think that's an important recognition. And even if we're late and our next meeting doesn't happen in time, I would like to see it happen. And I would say, if we need a motion for that, I'm going to make a motion for that Livingston recognizes October 12th as Indigenous Peoples Day.
I'll second it to put it on. If
Since it wasn't on, you put it on an agenda. Is that what you're motioning?
Yeah. For a future agenda. It's most likely not going to happen for the, soon. But to put it on an agenda for discussion and
then next year we'll be on time and we'll be able to do it at the appropriate meeting. This year we'll be off, but I think that it's a really important thing to recognize with where we are and who lives in our community and just the importance of real history. Thank you.
Right.
For the second.
Warren, you're up.
Well, this is a very critical time in this country, and I'm hoping to hear from as many people or have input from as many people as possible to make decisions for the city in the future. Like I say, you can't overemphasize how complex and critical this particular time is. Thank you.
Thanks, Warren. Mel, you're up.
Since I'm a member of the Knights of Columbus, quite a travesty to see the statue torn down, and I'd have to think about that. I mean, it's just been a long-standing thing, and what's going on around this country is not good for people to make decisions that they don't like a particular statue or a name or what happened 1,000 years ago. So as Knights of Columbus, we do an awful lot of things all over the world, and I have to think about that. I don't know. I think it's a pretty special special thing to us.
Thank you, Mel. Quentin?
Okay, I reserved the gazebo at the park for Saturday for a commissioner listening session. I believe Faith noticed it, from 9 a.m. till 10:30 on Saturday.
Can you say the time again? Sorry.
Oh, 9 o'clock to 10:30. And then I'll come up and work on your bathroom. And also, I don't, being on the Board of Health, I don't know how to emphasize more and more. We're going inside. We're still in this pandemic with COVID. We need to be responsible, and it's been a long haul, but it could get worse, and I think we can make it better. Please, people, mask up. Please do not be, pardon my French, but assholes in the store, and I've seen plenty of them, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Quentin. I have something a little more, a lot of great social thinking today. I have just one issue to address, and that is just a little update on the crossing. And I know I've said this a million times, but Facebook is not our news source and shouldn't be as our reality. But I know there were people thinking we just dropped the ball, that we didn't want, that we were discussing it and then we never did, or we didn't make any decisions. But the reality is we're waiting on our growth policy, waiting to make sure that the location of the crossing is at the best place for our community, or that when we choose the location, it is the best place for the community. So Michael, any updates on a timeline for that you'd like to share as far as the crossing is concerned?
We'll probably start looking at crossing issues again after the first of the year. That's probably really when we're going to look at it. Again, we're looking at that to make sure that it's ready and that we've gone through all the process and to get it on the next November's ballot. So it's a year out as far as a decision would go, but it's only a few months out as far as starting the process again to getting the input and the information we need, with the assumption that the growth policy is done by then. So we're not sure how long the growth policy approval process is going to take. So we're giving that some space. But once that's done, then we can move forward.
Great. Thank you. That's all I have tonight. Can I entertain a motion for adjournment?
Do you have a shout out though, Jarrell? I thought you were going to do shout outs. Start those up again.
It's 4 hours.
You wanted us to hold you to it. So I'm reminding you that you said you were going to do shout outs again.
Meeting because I'm not shouting out at 4 hours.
That's totally fine.
All right.
Eddie Van Halen. Shout out to Eddie.
You're aging.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Yeah.
So moved. So moved.
Yeah, I moved a long time ago.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
This meeting of the Livingston City Commission is adjourned at 33.
Great job, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Goodbye.